And then you go further into Orange County, and you have the Trinity League, which I think has to be the best high school football conference in America.
Yep.
And I mean, with Mater Dei, St. John Bosco, Servite, Santa Margarita, Olu, who am I missing?
Jay Sarah.
Jay Sarah. I mean, it's crazy. And I mean, what was it like playing in that conference?
Well, I would like to believe that would have a lot more years in my career if I wasn't playing that high level of football in high school. And I joke around with my dad about it. Like, hey, maybe if I went to, some other high school that was like D2-ish and I played football, baseball, and basketball and just developed, because it's all about hitting your peak at the right time. I mean, theoretically in the long run. And obviously, looking backwards, I mean, who knows, it could be over, but like I don't want to say I peaked in high school because I had a good college career, but like in terms of that run where like my body was really like I was able to go nonstop every day, and like I mean I played well in high school, but I got beat up a lot too. I mean the Mater Dei and Moscow D lines, I mean they were like insane. They had 8 or 10 guys going D1 just on defense, and we didn't really recruit like that. Like the one thing I respect about Santa Margarita is we're like some local homegrown, like my sister cheered at Santa Margarita, but like everyone else, like their brother played there, or like their dad was a coach there, or like we all played together in Pop Warner. Like there was no recruiting of outsiders coming in, and we were dealing with Mater Dei and Bosco, Jay Sarah, bussing kids in from whether it was Bellflower, from Crenshaw, from LA, all the way down to Santa Ana. Like they were getting the dudes. And so, I mean, anyways, high school, like the Trinity League was a huge advantage for me. Number one, playing with that talent, because then when I rolled out and played off season 7-on-7, and you kind of got to scope into what the rest of high school football looks like. It was an advantage of playing with that caliber of guys around you, but it also took a bit of a toll. But no, I mean the Trinity League is legit, and now it's gotten even better. I mean my junior year, my best year in high school, we finished 3rd in the league, and Bosco finished number 1 in the country. And they lost to Mater Dei, so instead of Mater Dei being 2 in the country, they were like 3 or 4, and we were 3 in the country. We were like 20 in the country in the national rankings. And Servite, we barely beat Servite. Servite was like 25. They took an at-large bid of Santa Margarita and Servite to go to the playoffs because only 2 teams went from each league. And they gave both the at-larges to us. But it was at the time, it was insanely competitive. Now it's really just Bosco and Mater Dei. It's the Alabama-Georgia deal, because all the resources are going in there. I mean, there's kids with NIL deals in high school. Like, there's kids getting paid $1,000 a month or something crazy, plus free tuition, plus getting transportation to and from, plus who knows what else. I mean, it's gotten crazy, at least from what I've heard. But no, that was kind of high school ball.
KJ, who are the biggest beasts that you played in high school? Like whether it was guys that went on to the league or guys that were just unbelievable in their high school days. Like who did you play that you were like, okay, holy shit, this is next level?
Well, against or with me? I mean, like
both.
Yeah.
Let's go with both.
I mean, I got to give a shout out to my boy Kyle Sweet. He was like the coldest slot receiver I've ever like. I mean, we broke every record there was in high school at Santa Margarita, but it was because he played quarterback for 12 years in Pop Warner, and it was like a deal. It was like who was going to be the quarterback at Santa Margarita, and he was kind of slotted to be the guy. He played quarterback as a sophomore, but if he was going to play in college, like it was going to be at wide receiver kind of thing, and it just so worked out that he was willing to go to wideout. But I mean, he was like my Julian Edelman all the way through in high school. But I mean, like, dude, like Bosco had Jaleel would catch a bubble screen for 80 yards like almost every game, who ended up going to UCLA. And I mean, just thinking about Bosco alone, I mean, they had Damian Mama, who was like 340 pounds, 350 pounds as a senior in high school. You know, I mean, there was all sorts of guys. I mean, Rosen tore it up pretty good. Josh Rosen tore it up pretty good. I mean, JT Daniels was playing as a true freshman at Mater Dei, winning games. Like
and
going
KJ,
to CIF.
if I remember the timeline properly, maybe I'm off by a year. Wasn't he playing ahead of Bryce Young? Wouldn't Bryce Young have been like, was he on the bench behind him, or was he?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So
I mean, the depth is just unbelievable.
So I get confused because like time flies, but like JT was a year behind me, or like 2 years behind me. He forewent his senior year of high school. No, sorry. He forewent his
his senior year. His senior year, I think you're right.
Yeah,
his senior year, he didn't play. He went straight to
yes,
I'm trying to remember if it was SC or Georgia, but
I believe he did 8th grade a second time because he wanted to come in high school playing as a true freshman. And they had a guy, Jack Lowry. I don't know if you remember the guy could throw.
I remember him.
The guy could throw the ball 130 yards. The guy literally had the best arm I've ever seen. You know,
he would go to Clarkson and they'd tell him to stop throwing it so damn hard. That was like his main piece of feedback. They're like, you don't have to throw it as hard as you can every time.
Can you even say that?
Dude, it's crazy.
It's not a catchable ball at a certain point. It's not like
I get
fastballs.
That. Yeah, I mean, God, I never thought that would be an issue for a Q. But in high school at the time, I mean, whatever. But, yeah, so Bryce Young was after JT. But JT played as a true freshman and, like, took him to CIF. I think he won freshman year he won CIF. Like, they beat Bosco. Or at least turned around and won sophomore year. So I was kind of in the shadows of Mater Dei and Bosco. Unfortunately, my whole time, we tried to beat them a couple times. We came damn close. You know, we came within 7 points, 10 points, 4 points to Mater Dei. But no, I mean, it was definitely an advantage. But it was funny because a lot of those guys, like, just going back thinking about, I mean, high school, dude, we had some studs. We had like 8 or 9 guys go D1 almost every year for 2-3 years in a row. And a lot of them, dude, they barely even had college careers, believe it or not. Injuries, beat up.
I believe you.
Like, on our O-line, dude. Like, I mean, you know, we had five O-linemen my freshman year on varsity when we won state. Every single one of them went D1. And really only one of them was able to make it through college just via, you know, health. Because they were playing that caliber of ball, right? I mean, young. You know, at 16, 17, 18 years old.
Given the caliber of play and all those, you know, studs on both sides of the ball for nearly every team in the conference, there had to have been every game major coaches and scouts on the sideline. You assume that adds pressure no matter what year you are, no matter what stage in your recruiting kind of life you're in yet. That had to have added pressure. I mean, who were some of the guys you saw on the sideline? Like, how does that go when you pull up to your game and you recognize 3 SEC head coaches or whatever it was?
I mean, Shaw, Coach P, that one game, like sophomore year. You had Kiffin out there. I mean, honestly, like a lot of those games, I mean, you'll get, I mean, SC coaches, obviously, they're right here. UCLA. I mean, I don't want to say I saw like every big-time coach, but at some point in that 3-year span from sophomore to senior year, if it wasn't at the game, right, because a lot of them, they got pretty tight schedules, and it's got to be convenient with where they're playing, you know, just the timing because they're in season too. So, like, you would see a lot more coaches roll through in the springtime, you know, and maybe during training camp, or obviously you got the recruiting blocks when they're actually coming out hard. But, I mean, we saw most of the Pac-12. Harbaugh flew in on a freaking helicopter to our high school one day. Like, coach is like, hey, at the time he just took the job. Me and Dylan Crawford, I was already committed to Stanford. Dylan hadn't committed. Oh no, actually,
wasn't he committed somewhere? Didn't he flip? Am I remembering
No,
that?
so, no, I hadn't committed yet. We were thinking about going to play together because he was like the number two guy in the country. I mean, like we were at a lot of the same offers, and Brady Hoke got fired from Michigan, and Harbaugh took the job. And me and Dylan both got out. We went on this little circuit in springtime after our sophomore year. We went to Michigan, Florida, Florida State, Alabama, Tennessee, and Notre Dame, all in like spring break. Like every day we went to a different spot, and we both really liked Michigan, and Harbaugh knew that apparently. And so he came. He was doing a camp in like Mission Viejo, but he came in on a helicopter and landed like right on top of our field, and like came and rolled out and told me and Dylan that our scholarship still stood with Michigan because we previously got him from Brady Hoke.
Yeah,
So that was pretty cool.
that's
Um,
awesome.
but I mean, you know, Harbaugh was doing all kinds of crazy stuff at that time. He was climbing trees and taking. He took. I remember he took Hutchinson to school in the morning. He showed up like past midnight. I believe it's Hutchinson, the dude who got drafted maybe
Yeah,
from Michigan.
yeah, yeah. With the
Um,
Lions.
yeah, took him to school. I guess he couldn't start recruiting till 12 p.m. Right, 12:01, and so he got there that night, hung out, slept there, and took him to school in the morning.
I,
Um,
that
but
guy's such a character. I mean, so on to
oh,
the
sorry, but in terms of your question, adding pressure, playing with the coaches, I mean, at the end of the day, most of the time, it's like when there's scouts there in college. I mean, the only time I was like, "Whoa, this is actually a real deal," was when my senior year we lined up against uh, Herbert at Oregon. Sorry, at Stanford, and there was like all 32. Somebody from every 32 teams was there, and you could
yeah.
just like see them lined up in a row. And I was like, "Wow!" Like that's the first time I was like, "Okay, this is different than like." Seeing scouts around the area, it's at Stanford. Like we don't always necessarily just get this,
Yeah.
maybe Bama,
Did,
Georgia. This is what it looks like, but
KJ, did that affect you? Like, does that were you playing better because of that, or did your game drop a step?
well, I mean, typically for me, like how it's always been is just I always play the best when I have like the most adrenaline, the highest levels of cortisol, like when it means the
Gotcha.
most. That's honestly just how it's always been for me. That particular game went down. Great first drive, came down on a helmet, threw an inside fade, and fucking tore my RCL and my thumb. Like after that first drive was the worst game I played in my college career. Obviously, scouts, everyone knew that I was too prideful and to come out of the game. But I could barely take a snap or grip the ball. I can barely throw 15 yards. I probably Shaw afterwards told me for a really long time, like, I'm like, hey, why didn't you take me out of the game? I mean, I couldn't even throw like a bubble screen. He's like, oh, I didn't. He's like, I didn't want to tell you that I was going to take you out of the game. Like, I knew you didn't want to come out. So, I mean, that was probably the only time when, like, I don't know, that was because of injury. But in terms of the moment, I mean, the bigger the better for me. It just kind of makes everything a little bit quieter. At least thinking back on my career, like when I played my best games, it was typically the ones that meant the most. It was typically the Notre Dame game, obviously
Yeah.
LSU and the Washingtons. Like when we played the best team, was when I played my best game for the most part. But
Okay, so let's lock in on the recruiting
yeah,
front here because this is
yep,
stuff that I think a lot of people are interested in, and I think have a lot of probably wrong ideas about, a lot of big ideas
yeah,
about, but you don't know it until you hear it from someone who is really in that whole process. And
yeah,
so tell me if I'm wrong on any of this. I mean, ultimately, I think you ended up being a four-star recruit and like the number two ranked pro style QB in the country coming out of high school. By the time it was all said and done, and you broke all these records at Santa Margarita, went to the Elite 11, but before high school ended, obviously, and you were long committed, you got your first offer from the then reigning national champs at Florida State, who had just
yeah.
won with Jameis. Like, describe the feelings that come with that being your first offer.
Yeah, I mean, it was crazy how that went down. I mean, basically, after my sophomore year, I put together a highlight tape back in the day when we used to be able to start our plays on Huddle, put it together, send it out to like anyone that I knew of. I mean, my dad, believe it or not, had a friend. He played at Crescenta Valley High School in LA. and knew somebody who was the tight end coach. His name was Tim Brewster at Florida State. Sent him the tape and thought nothing of it because I probably sent 50 to 100 emails with the huddle link included. And I remember like maybe 2-3 weeks after the season ended, I was like, oh, there was a lot of good in that season for sure. But there was also like some shit that I had to grow on and get better for the next year. I didn't really know where I sat in the spectrum of, the recruitment, the recruitment arena. So anyways, like 2-3 weeks after the season, Tim Brewster from Florida State calls me and he's like, hey man, we watched your tape. There's only a couple sophomores that we got our eye on early. We'd love to come out there and see you this spring. Jimbo watched your tape. He wants to offer you now, but he wants me to come out there and see you live and make sure that the tape matches you throwing live. I'm like, oh wow, okay, I guess I got a chance to play college football. So right then and there, I was like done with basketball, done with baseball. That's a whole nother story. It's funny how it gets young and then you end up just focusing in on one sport. But like a month later, like 6 a.m., like I had obviously slowly been talking to coaches and under the radar, right? There was doing footage of some guys and they ended up doing something to me and like, I don't know, like guys, like a little bit of good stuff started coming out, but then all of a sudden, like it was sophomore spring, it was before school, like 6 a.m. I get a call from Tim Brewster. Hey, it's Jimbo Fisher. I'm like, oh, Jimbo, how's it going? He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I just got out of bed. I'm trying to get to school this morning, but I'm in no rush. How you doing? And he basically was like, hey, man, we were thinking about holding off, coming to see you throw live, but we want to get ahead of the game, and we want to be your first offer. Florida State, we want to be your first offer. So you got an offer from Florida State. I remember, like, obviously being stoked, running into my parents' room, waking them up, and being like, hey, I think I might be able to play some college ball. But so first offer was Florida State, and it's crazy. I feel like I kind of came up early in like the social media era. Now it's obviously way different than it was then, but like posted that on social media, and then Tennessee called me the next morning at like 7 a.m. when I'm in class. I walk out, I got to go to the bathroom, and coach from Tennessee at the time, oh my God, I'm blanking on his, Butch Jones.
Butch Jones. I was going to say, was it Butch or was that after his time? Yeah, Butch Jones.
No, it was Butch Jones. So then it was Tennessee, and then it was Miami, like 3 days in a row. And by Miami actually came by the school. So anyways, it was Florida State, Tennessee, Miami was my first three offers, and I was pretty fired up about it. And then from there, like, opened up when the coaches could come out and start stopping by school. And I don't know, that offseason ended up, building up 15, 20 offers before I even went in. Well, that also included coaches I was talking to that wanted to see me live, and I did take the initiative and fly out there. It was kind of a deal of like if you showed interest and you flew out, like you were going to leave with an offer. That's kind of how at least the sense was. You never know with these coaches, but that's at least what it was because I did it a couple times. And so that was kind of the sophomore off season, was traveling to schools that were on my wish list of schools that I wanted to be or have an opportunity to make a decision to commit to. And it's sure enough, Stanford, my freshman year, I'm hanging out in the football offices. I had a good freshman year, and then the coach pulls me up for varsity just to like hang out, right, and go to the playoff games and like travel with the team. And coaches start rolling through the building, and like I remember seeing Coach Bloomgren and Coach Tav and Coach Alomar when I was a freshman in our football offices, and like, hey man, we heard you're supposed to be leading the squad next year. Would love you to come out to Stanford in a camp. I'm like, oh, when? They're like, oh no, like after this year. So that I went out there literally after my freshman year in like February or March for a camp, and they're in off season. And it was the first camp I ever went to and attended. And that was interesting because when I left there, they're like, hey, we think you're going to have a busy sophomore, or we think you're going to have a busy offseason next year. And I was like, oh, wow, I guess I am going to have a chance of playing college ball. Because I didn't know where I sat. You know, you're playing – we were like 3 or 4 in league. And, like, I don't know. I thought I was doing all right. I didn't even play the varsity snap. So, anyways, flash forward to, like, through sophomore year. By the time I was going into my junior season, I kind of had an offer from every school that I was really interested in. You know, there was a couple that I didn't, but it didn't. I never visited or never went out to. But for me, it was kind of like I'm a California kid. UCLA was on the table, SC was on the table, Stanford was on the table, Cal was on the table. It was like them and then Bama and Michigan that I was like most interested in. I thought the SEC and those spots were cool, but like a Southern California kid jumping into that scene, there's some things that like I didn't think it would be a good idea to randomly jump into a culture that you don't know much about. But anyways, lo and behold, it ended up being those 4: Stanford, Michigan, Alabama, and SC. And honestly, now I could say candidly, but like I was a huge SC fan growing up. Carson Palmer went to Santa Margarita. I was the ball boy there every chance I could get growing up. And my mom went to SC and uncles, everyone went to SC. It seemed as like that was where everyone expected me to go. And to be quite honest, it was just because of the coaching situation. They had Kiffin there, who when I went on campus, I met him. And then it was Coach Orgeron. And then it was Sark. And then I'm talking to Sark junior year. And he's like, hey, dude, come on, let's do this. And then I'm like, all right, well, give me a little bit of time. Then he gets fired. And then Helton takes over. So there was just so much turnover. And, like, SC for the first time was kind of, I don't want to say flatline, but, like, they were hanging out in a world where, like, it didn't seem like they had the whole thing figured out.
Not the same glitz and glamour that they once had. That was a weird period, for sure.
Yeah, it was. And then you got Stanford, who's won 2 Rose Bowls in 3-4 years, and then that year never forget, it was like right after my junior season, we lost first round of the playoffs, and then I was in the mountains with the family skiing, and I had the Rose Bowl on, and Coach Shaw called me the morning of the Rose Bowl before they played Iowa, and I was like, okay, like this is pretty sweet. And then they went on and won like 55-17 or something crazy. And I was like, yeah, this is where I'm gonna put my future. They're winning. I go to NorCal, get out of Southern Cal, get out of LA. The distractions that LA could potentially come with, and go check out what's going on in the valley up in Northern California. So in a nutshell, that's a bit of like the recruiting process for me. And how it ended up, taking a SoCal kid to NorCal.
KJ, can you back us up a little bit in terms of like, so you got all these coaches coming after you, right? Saban at Bama, Harbaugh at Michigan, Jimbo Fisher at Florida State. Like, what are they calling you every day? Are they texting you, checking in every couple days? Like, for somebody that just doesn't know, kind of the inside scoop on that recruiting situation. Like, what's that?
I think something I realized along the way, when you're kind of talking about like parsing through the noise and like who's actually really invested in and believes in you, and versus kind of saying the recruiting coach speak, over and over again. Because like, for example, Alabama offered 10 guys, the quarterbacks. Florida State offered 10 guys, quarterbacks. SC offered 3 initially for my class, Shea Patterson, Malik Henry, and me, which I wasn't stoked about, to be honest, because I'm the SoCal kid. It was where I wanted to go, and they kind of Sark, I think, like made a bit of a mistake just looking back on it, because he offered both of them at the same time, and it was kind of like where I wanted. Like they knew it was kind of where I wanted to go.
And he got none of you after all that, huh?
Exactly, because
Yeah.
it put the pressure on, basically saying his deal was it was first come, first serve. I would like any one of you three, and he was trying to lock some guy in, right? And so that's like one style. There's like not a ton of communication, but then all of a sudden he offers us three because they came a little later. Some of the schools that like, SC came later, Stanford came later, and I started to realize this trend of like Florida State, Tennessee, SEC, much more aggressive. Like, let's throw out 300 offers, in one class. I went and looked up all these guys they offered. Like, they're offering 10 quarterbacks. If you go up and down the list, I mean, 300 offers in one class, and you can take 25, 30 guys. I mean, you're not going to be in constant communication with these guys, right? It's kind of just like they sit in a position where they feel like they're going to get the best at the end of the day, but they sure as hell don't want to miss on anybody. So it's funny because, like, they offer 300 guys, but, like, let's say one of us in the, end of sophomore year, junior year, didn't have that good a year, they don't really think as highly of you, wanted to call up, you probably call up your quarterback coach first or the OC, the guy recruiting you the most, like, hey, man, I'm getting hot. I think I want to pull the trigger. And, like, there's plenty of stories of the coaches preventing that from happening or just kind of not giving you the right signals, and, like, they're ready to accept your verbal commitment. So, like, I feel like that's kind of Alabama's world and Florida State and, like, when the big dogs up top, especially early on, But now the communication cadence with, like, a Stanford was like, hey, man, like, our plan is to only offer one guy in each class. And at the time, Josh Rosen, who was the number one guy in the country in 2015, really wanted to go to Stanford. And it's funny how the dominoes fall because, like, Rosen goes to UCLA, Darnold goes to SC. Was KJ less inclined to go to UCLA or SC because they were there? A little bit. I mean, granted, they had a good career. They're going to be there 3 years, so I'm going to be starting to tell them at least a redshirt sophomore, But Stanford, they were going after Rosen and Wimbush, who went to Notre Dame, and they missed on kind of both of them. But I also, while they were recruiting them, was like, hey, if you guys don't want to take a guy in 15, I mean, we can make it, we can make a deal and we can get this thing rolling because if there's nobody there in 15 and the next quarterback who was already there was Keller or whatever, who was like a freshman, but the time I got there would be like a junior, and I knew for a fact that I was going to get 2 years of real starting opportunity because you never know what's going to come behind you, but at least looking forward, if we were talking about opportunity to play, I was like, at the end of the day, that's all that really matters. I mean, there's so many guys. Oh, I'm a 5-star. I'm top 2. I'm going to Georgia. I'm going to Tennessee. You'd be blown away at the numbers of, like, top high school guys that really never touched the dance floor in college. Like, it really surprised you or get in a transfer pattern. And this was before the transfer portal. Now you can you don't have to be you didn't have to be as spot on with your initial commitment. Because for me, I was mentally, I wasn't going to transfer. There was no way. Like, where I was going to go, like, that's where I was going to go, and that's how I was looking at the decision. The current landscape's changed. I mean, shit, you can go make a little riskier decision, go to a little different school, and if you don't like the smell or taste of it, you can ship out of there on, like, a day and a half, 5-day notice, basically. Yeah. It's kind of what it feels like. Whether that's good or bad, who knows, but that's the current landscape. So I don't know, when you're talking about the communication patterns with Stanford, they were very one-on-one. Like, they said they only wanted to offer one guy. So they held the offer from me. Like, I had all these other offers, but I didn't have Stanford. And they basically didn't want to offer me until I gave them that signal that, like, I was kind of on board. Because their goal was to offer and close the deal. Now, I didn't close it right away. A lot of people do that. I hung on to it for 6 months because I was still really thinking. Now, what's funny is USC offered me, and they knew I loved SC. And so then Shaw fired back like a week or two later when he was kind of figuring out he only wanted to offer one guy. So that's kind of what happened with me.
It's funny,
But yeah,
KJ. It's funny how you mentioned, you said you see how the dominoes fall. I
yeah,
mean, it is something that like you pull a thread and it can just go forever when you think about where guys decided to go, where people flipped, where offers were pulled, where people didn't academically qualify, which, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that may have happened with Brandon Wimbush at Stanford.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
literally, I mean, I think of it, you think of like a sliding door moment in your life. You talk about cutting, somewhat negotiating and saying, well, if you really, looks like this Wimbush thing's not going to work out, if you guys are really not going to take a QB in 2015, then maybe I will be your guy. That's a lot more
yeah.
appealing to me. If they had taken a QB in 2015, they would not have had a depth chart issue at Stanford, and your boy would have never ended up going to Stanford. It's true. I've thought about it many times.
You would have been at Princeton if you weren't at Stanford. So
I would, but it changes the trajectory of your life either way. Maybe I would have gone to Princeton.
Totally.
I thought I was going to play in the Ivy League, and that was what I was set on. And then out of nowhere, I got DM'd by Coach Picasso and Tavita saying, for the first time in many years, we're taking a preferred walk-on QB. Are you interested? I was like, yes. But anyway, it's wild how it really is just the live recruiting landscape is just this giant chessboard that guys, you can say, I'm just focusing on myself. I'm not worried about the noise. It actually, it is to your benefit as the recruit to keep your eye on the chessboard and to actually understand what are guys thinking. So I don't know, did you have any conversation with, I remember, as a guy way, way down that list in the national QB rankings, I knew everyone. I knew all the big names. And so between, Jacob Eason, Shea Patterson, as you mentioned, Shane Buechele, even Malik Henry,
Buechele, Felipe Franks,
Jack Allison.
Yeah, Jack. I know all those guys, which is cool because of the Clarkson deal.
And Elite 11, I would assume. Yes.
Yes, Elite 11 too.
Yeah.
But there was text messages sent from me to Shea Patterson, like, yo, dude, like, I know we just all got offered at the same time, but like, what's the deal? Are you serious about you're from he's from Pennsylvania. He's from yeah.
Is he? Is he originally from Pennsylvania? I think he's Southern.
Louisiana.
Yeah, he's Louisiana.
Louisiana.
Sorry, I'm
Louisiana.
sorry. He's from Louisiana. He's gonna get mad that I didn't know that, but he if he ever listens to this, but no, I remember there was text messages sent like, hey, dude, like, what do you between me and you, like, let's none of us make an irrational, emotional, knee-jerk decision because we want to prevent the dominoes of the chessboard from falling too soon,
Some form of communication has to be beneficial to both parties in that case.
Exactly.
Right? You don't want to catch anyone off guard
It really was. It was like, did I lose you? Can you hear me, Tyler?
I can hear you.
Yeah, it was like neither of us wanted to commit before we wanted to commit, And so if we could get a little bit better intel, like, I'll give you an example. I was stressed out on my trip to the South and Midwest because this was all around the talk of the 2015 deal because Coach Bloomgren wanted to know, he wanted to lock me in, and
totally.
I wanted to go see. This was after my sophomore year because I almost committed before my junior season because you get so excited. So my sophomore year, I went. I set up a trip on spring break to go to Michigan, like I said earlier, Florida, Florida State, Alabama, Tennessee, and Notre Dame. And I remember mentioning to Bloom, like, hey, this is what I'm going to go do. While I was doing that on spring break, they were having all the juniors, the 2015 junior quarterback weekend, Brent. They bring everybody in. And so they had Wimbush there, they had Eason there, and they had I might be blanking on two other guys, but some studs. And he was basically playing the game of like, hey, like we might lock in a guy this weekend in 2015. And I know that you're really serious, and you mentioned about not getting a 2015 guy. If you go on this trip and you go date around elsewhere and go figure it out, then we got to pursue a 15.
Yep.
And I'm like, shit. I'm like, am I really not going to go enjoy this process and like get cuffed up before I even play my junior season? I mean, I wanted to go see Alabama. I wanted to go see Michigan. I wanted to go see, and I was just like, damn. I mean, I guess in a dating situation, if it's not meant to be, it's not meant to be. But I'm gonna go, check these other places out that I've watched on TV for years and thought were really cool places to potentially be a part of. And so I rolled the dice a bit on that. But I remember I was super nervous the whole time. And you're right, Rosen, honestly, between us, didn't get an offer. There was
Shaw was kind of.
And you hear the stories. I mean,
he was KJ. He was unbelievable in high school throwing the ball.
Dude,
he was sick.
He was.
I saw him at 7-on-7.
He threw the ball as good or better than Peyton Manning when he was like 17 years old.
Because literally, that's not really an exaggeration.
Let's call it what it is.
You call a spade. We go back to sophomore year. The reporter asked Rosen, hey, you're playing Santa Margarita this week, playoff contentions, or league contentions. It was for league. Quarterback on the other side, Costello, sophomore, similar stature to what you were coming up as a sophomore. What do you think is play, whatever? And he goes, who are you talking about? I don't know who you're talking about. Or something of that nature. You know what I'm saying? So I put my boy. I think he would regret a lot of how he went about life then. I think he was basically just put on such a pedestal at such a young age that like he thought he was bulletproof, right? He thought he was like invincible. And I don't know, I think that's something a lot of guys who get to that point. And, I remember times when I had to like check myself, and like that's a real thing. But he was like,
totally.
he wasn't conceptualizing the reactions and like the disdain that people were getting from what he was saying.
Yeah.
And I get it. He's
having 3-4 quarterbacks. Like, is that something that you were especially privy to, or is that something that everybody's looking at? Because as Brent mentioned, like at what point are you like, I don't give a fuck. I'm gonna go wherever I want, and I'm gonna win out. How big of a factor is that?
Dude, that's a good question, because there was a lot of times where there was that side of me that said exactly that. I don't give if Deshaun Watson's playing, but like he's already starting to establish that's a bad example. But like, for example, Darnold at SC, right? He was going to SC, and I remember sitting at a USC practice with Darnold. It was me and him, and he hadn't committed yet, neither had I. And I know Darnold pretty well now, but this was a pretty cool story back in the day. We both looked at each other, and between us was like who they had playing at the time. They had Ricky Town there and Max Brown.
Ricky Town.
And we're like, dude, he's like, dude, I'm rolling to SC. I'm like, dude, I might go to SC. He's like, let's both come in here and compete it out, like kind of joking, And he was a year ahead of me, so like, you do have a little bit of leverage, like if you're going to compete ahead. I mean, Davis Mills sure as hell didn't care that I committed to Stanford. But I think way more guys now. I think I'm an outlier in looking at it like a bit of like risk analysis, right? Of like, hey, I want to be in a situation because I believe in myself, and a lot of success in this world in college football relies on timing and a lot of things outside of your control. So the things that I couldn't necessarily have control over was going into a situation where there would be a need for somebody like myself to step in. Not to say I was scared to go in another direction and go a class behind, who knows, a Burrow or some guy like that. I don't know if he was my class, or I'm trying to think ahead. Oh, go to UCLA, right? Behind Rosen.
Yeah, easy one.
Go to USC behind Darnold. I mean, those were the two schools that I was looking at pretty hard, right? And if you think about it in long run, if shit played out really well for them, they started a true freshman-ish. They're out of there in 3 years, and I'm a year behind them. But if they played 3 full seasons, that would technically, with a redshirt, leave me 3 years. But you don't know how it's going to play out. I mean, you could get in a situation where, you're behind a guy for 3 years, know. And there's a lot of guys previously in the past that's happened to, and I didn't really want to take that risk, being out of the sport, being out of the playing that game for 3 years in a game. There's no preseason, I know there's a lot of guys that have or did lose their edge in that experience, and I was like, hey, when Hogan's gone, I'm in here. Honestly, I'm going to try and play as a freshman here. People thought I was psycho because it was like the hardest offense on planet Earth to learn. I don't know. Maybe Frank could attest to that. And I thought I was a smart guy.
Fully agree. We'll get to KJ. We'll get right into that. I'm going to talk about that for sure.
Like Stanford base play, green right wing tight, Z short, 96 power, kill 95 weak, alert 200 jet dragon. Mississippi State.
That's on the docket. Don't worry. That's on the docket for sure.
You know what I'm saying? Like 92.
Yes.
Hey, give me outs with mesh. You know what I'm saying? And Matt, you swing left or right. I'll tell you where to go. Let's play.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, so that was like a little bit of barrier to entry to play as a true freshman. But I knew that I mean, granted, Keller was a good player, and the guy was a hell of a athlete in general, and like
just a
smart
physical stud.
Dude's just like a Navy SEAL. Like he was just an absolute stallion. Like I also didn't
QB in the QB room too. Same deal.
Oh, I'm talking. Oh, he's not a Navy SEAL now. I'm saying the way he trained and the way he went about his business. The guy was working as hard or harder than anyone else in college football. I got a lot of respect for him. Like he was that kind of guy. So I don't know. At the end of the day, I don't know if I picked the best situation to walk in. A lot of guys, when I walked in, they're like, "Oh, you're coming here after Keller. He was here in 14." Like, yeah, you'll ride the pine for 2-3 years.
A huge recruit himself,
Yeah,
huge recruit himself.
Number 4 guy. He'll go to the NFL, and then you'll step in later. And I was like, no. Like I decided not to go to other schools because that's what I thought. But here I thought otherwise. So when push comes to shove, there is a certain point where you got to drop the cojones and be like, I want to go where I want to go, and I trust in how things are going to fall into place. I think about it. I think about, there's life after ball, and there's a lot of other things that came into play. There's the 40-year decision, not a 4, that Stanford sells us on. And we're going to realize that over our next 40 years and already have. And there's a lot of stuff that comes along with, there's a lot of metrics that went into making that decision that wasn't just football. If it was just football, I might have just canned it up and went to Bama. You know what I'm saying? Canned it up and tried to go to Georgia. And that's why, it's interesting looking back on it. But being from out here, I don't know, man. I was planning on playing or spending the majority of my life probably on the West Coast. So having, that tie to the West Coast, and I'm from Southern Cal and then went to school in NorCal, so most of California, it feels like very much home for me and will feel like that for the rest of my life. So there was a lot of things that went into it outside of just hey, all I do is play football and I'm going to go, to Bama. I mean, sure. As much as at the time, maybe it's just because Pops brainwashed me and a lot of other people brainwashed me in a good way that hey, dude, you don't know when this thing's going to end. And I would line up my injury list fucking against anybody in America, over a 20-year career.
We're going to get to that too. We're going to get to that too. I want to make sure we cover that.
That's what it is. But so there's a lot that went into that decision. But ultimately, they were also hot at the time. There's a little bit of ethos there. They had just come off a couple of Rose Bowls. I mean, my dream was to play in the Rose Bowl, at least before thinking about NFL. Grandparents still alive, 94 years old, 93, but at the time they were 89.
Good for them.
Have them come to a game in the Rose Bowl with all of my Southern Cal friends and all my SC friends at the Rose Bowl. Like,
It's
that's
awesome.
why I wanted to play in the Rose Bowl. You know, so I
Yeah.
would have to go to the Big Ten,
For sure.
or I would have to go to the Pac-12. And then you had Darnold at SC, you had Rosen at UCLA, and you had nobody in 15 at Stanford, and it just seemed like the right move to do.
I'm
No,
gonna. I know. Tyler has a question for you. And this will be a good handoff to this next question. The first time that I met you in any Stanford setting was my, unofficial visit, having gotten my preferred walk-on offer, where they're like, "No, really, we need you to get into school. Like, you need to, don't mail it in on your app, but really, you could be a part of this program." And they're like, "You need to come up for a game, and you'll stay with a player." And I stayed with Jay Tyler, who I had a mutual friend with, and I went up for the Notre Dame game, and I think you were there. You were there, and a ton of guys were there, and Conrad hits a game winner in what might have been the best Stanford football game of the last decade, and rushed the field and beat number 3 Notre Dame, number 6 Notre Dame. There was so much momentum, and I remember being on that visit and, just being like, wow, this is so unbelievable. And you're in the locker room after the game, and, Conrad's just been carried off the field, and there's Christian McCaffrey, there's Hogan. Like, it was, things were,
field. It was awesome.
Yeah, so did I. It was awesome. It was great. But anyway, that was just like a little one recruiting experience with a lot of momentum. It was tough to turn away from.
Yeah, and that's obviously important, right? Like, and this is being completely candid, because, like, I always do remind people, they always talk about why you went to Stanford. Why would you go to Stanford? I'm like, guys, like, it was a legit powerhouse program. Like, they were pumping, and I was a football addict. Like, the whole thing about life after football, this and that. Now, like, yes, that played a part in it, but, like, I really thought we could go there, win the Pac-12 every year, what I'm saying, and go to the Rose Bowl.
Yep.
And things really start clicking, and we continue to progress on this trajectory. We get in the playoff. I mean, if you're planning on spending the majority of your life out here and
I think
going to school where you're planning on spending the majority of your time, I mean, what would be going to school in Alabama and coming back?
You don't know what you're getting into. I know your buddies with Eason, right? I mean, or at least knew each other at one point. Maybe you still are, but
I talked to him this week.
There you go. So he went from Lake Stevens to Athens, Georgia. Like, that's an example, Like, and I know it didn't pan out. It didn't pan out the way he probably planned with Fromm and with everything that went down on the field, but probably off the field, it is also just, it's a freaking culture shock when you're maybe a 17-year-old early enrollee, and you're as far as you could be from Washington State down in Georgia.
He was, like, blown away that, like, this world existed, kind of deal, and he was like, dude, like, I mean, and, like, I'm a recruit walking around the town, and, like, everybody knows who I am. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't even know that existed, being 17, 18 years old. I mean, if you don't go to I never been to an Iron Bowl. I never been to, Georgia Bama game. I never been to, I never been to any of those games. So you don't really know what that culture looks like. And that's why I wanted to go on that damn visit. I will say things might have been a little different. You obviously get tied down with your high school schedule. If I went to a Michigan football game, you know what I'm saying? I did go to a Bama game, but I was already committed. I just went, and they played, like, Florida Atlantic, but it was still a really cool experience to kind of see the whole deal.
And KJ, one last point on the recruiting front. I mean, I know you're getting recruited by all these top schools. You chose kind of where you were going to take your OVs. You go to these schools. What was the biggest moment where you were like, who pulled out the red carpet the most? Because, like, I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, maybe Saban, but also, like, he's the least desperate, right? Like, who pulled out the red carpet the most on those official visits? And was there a moment where you were just like, holy shit? Like, you hear these stories, right? Like, okay, guys going to clubs, getting strippers, money bags dropped on their doorstep.
So you take your officials When is it, Brent? Is it after your senior season or before? It's
No,
a
I
little
think
bit before.
I think it's during your senior season because you go for game days, right?
Yeah. But I'm trying to think when the cutoff is. Like, you can't start taking them until you're a senior. So all my stuff was unofficial. There's nothing much different than an unofficial and official outside of it's on your dime. Well, there is a lot different. You stay at a really nice hotel and everything's taken care of for you. You know, you stay down at the Rosewood for Stanford or whatever.
There you
I only
go.
took
There
one
you go.
official. It was with Stanford. You know, and I mean, you know, I had a great time. You know, I mean, it was a good time. But
Shaw showed you a good time.
the mass exodus out of the program versus versus us not bringing in transfers. Like we had no access to the transfer portal, so players can only flow out of our program, not into. And
And that's primarily due to the admissions obstacle, right?
primarily, that's 100,000%.
Yeah,
It's only
that's
the
what it
admissions.
is. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's
Yeah.
the admissions office. Stanford will not take another student from another school transferring in unless it's a grad transfer who was a badass student at another university.
Gotcha.
Right.
And I don't know too many badass students at another university that are top players in college football that want to transfer. I don't know if Caleb Williams was a 4.0 student that wanted to grad transfer to Stanford.
Right.
So I don't think those exist in the world. No,
Anything
okay,
where you were
okay.
like, okay,
First of
that
all,
shows like the insider track to like how ridiculous recruiting can be.
no, I mean, I'll give you a little story. This one's pretty cool. I mean, this was a little bit of everything. So I pull out to Michigan. I'm talking to Coach Nussmeier, who's now the quarterback coach of the Cowboys. He was the offense coordinator for Michigan, and he was Brady Hoke's right-hand man. He was a stud, great recruiter, spent a lot of time in the league. He was actually under Saban at one point at Bama, like very high respect, great recruiter. And me and my dad pulled up out there, and actually Dylan Crawford, who went to my high school, and then I brought like my trainer at the time, who rolled with us too, and then Dylan's dad. And we show up, and we're like going through their Hall of Fame, and it's all great. And I'm rolling around with Brady Hoke and Nussmeier, and like there's some other guys taking around another kid. Well, that kid ended up being Malik Henry, who was, me and him were number one, number two in the country, whatever, debatable. And I'm like, are you shitting me? We're here the same day? Like they lined this thing up to get us both out here on the same day. What's going on? And we were in aggressive talks. Like they were pushing me, and I was telling them like I'm Michigan's up there. Like it's in the top 3 for me. Like I sure as hell don't want to lose the opportunity. So stay up to date with me on how things are going with the other Qs. Because like if I'm really your first guy, like you better let me know when that thing's heating up on the other end, because I don't want to miss the opportunity. And they would always say yes. They're going to keep you up. But sure enough, me and Malik Henry are on campus at the same time. And so they're like, hey guys, you guys trying to work out? And I'm like, yeah, I got Dylan here. He's my wideout. I was like, yeah, let's go throw it in the big house. Let's go throw it around in the big house. Me, Dylan, my boy, my dad, trainer, his dad, Malik Henry and his dad, we all get cleated up, get dressed in the frickin' locker room. Jerseys, everything up top, the history of the big house. I'm putting my spikes on, and it's like I'm going to war with Malik Henry, because we both had publicly said Michigan was in our top, right? And it was, dude, they kind of had us battle it out. It was like, if both of you guys wanted to, let's see who's meant to be a Wolverine type. I mean, they had a camera like on a tripod, like right behind the workout, like big ass camera, which it was kind of interesting because it was like, you thought whoever committed they were going to take anyhow, but I think this was just coaches trying to get creative, right? And like have one of us have like a euphoric moment and do better than the other and be like, let's go, I'm going to Michigan. I have no fucking clue, but that's kind of what it seemed like. Anyways, long story short, the record will say, and it is true, I get in there with my wideout, but he also caught for Malik Henry. And I'm just, dude, it's a windy day in the big house. Like, it's blowing. And they're trying to see if we can throw in the wind. No dome. And I'm like, fired up. Once again, big moment. Like, I'm letting it rip. And, Malik Henry about 25 minutes through the workout. Dad comes in, he's like, hey, he's been throwing like 3 or 4 days at this camp the last couple of days. Like, he's got to call it. You've seen enough. So Malik Henry essentially taps out of the workout. He basically leaves early, like does his thing and like leaves. And we end up hanging out. Nuss is like, all right, we're going to dinner tonight. So Nuss picks me and my dad up at a hotel, blacked out, like caddy, sick car, really cool. Took us down to dinner, like Dad's drinking beers with Coach, like we're just hanging out, and I would have loved to have been drinking beers, but I was sipping on some lemonade or some bullshit. But
no beers. They don't like beers.
I think if I went back knowing how it is, I probably would have. But anyways, that was pretty cool. I mean, dude, you never know nowadays. Like, they can't pay for dinner, they can't do this, they can't do that. That was like a full on. They did like it was like everything was taken care of. It was a good night, and I left there like, damn, like Michigan's dope, Nussmeier's dope, and they're gonna sit in the top 3, and we're gonna fly home and figure it out. So, I mean, I don't know how deep you want me to get in like stories of good times.
Let's talk through Stanford, and let's get to Mississippi State, and let's talk Leach, because I know that there's going to be more to come out on the Leach side. But we got to hit on Stanford, because obviously what we've been building up to with all this through, youth, high school, recruiting, all these visits, you end up choosing Stanford, obviously. And Stanford doesn't do early enrollment, so you can't get there a semester early. Or you can't start anyway. I think that they may have actually just recently changed that, but at our time anyway, that was not the case. And having gone there same year as you, I can firmly say Stanford is a very unique place, I think, to say the least. In some really good ways, and other ways.
Unique? What do you mean? What do you mean by unique?
Some ways that are just plain weird. Like
no, I know. I hear you.
So, Brent, come on, shed some light.
So, well, I'm gonna bounce it to KJ. What was your first impression of life at Stanford, and what would be, I guess it's a two-parter, but what would be like your one-sentence description of the Stanford experience looking back in retrospect?
Oh, man. My first impression of Stanford, because like my preconceived notions of Stanford was that it was the university that had the highest concentration of wealth, thought, and ideas, like in one place, right? Top 5 university in the world.
Is that straight out of Shaw's mouth or yours?
No. Well, you asked me why I went to Stanford, and I obviously knew I was going to play football, but like along the way, there's a lot of other things that I'm keen about and like capture my attention outside of just playing football.
KJ, one thing on that note, within the recruiting cycle, something that the football team does strategically, there are like Silicon Valley legends talking to prospective players. You get to talk to Condoleezza Rice. I remember I talked to George Foster, who's a Stanford Business School professor. Like, they expose you as a high schooler to some big wig people very quickly. And I think that for the right Stanford profile, or for the right recruiting profile, that is a big pull, because it's really cool, the people they put you in front of.
Dude, I mean, a couple of my like best relationships at Stanford, obviously with Dr. Rice, Condoleezza Rice being my advisor, Holly Tsai.
Yep.
And then George Foster taking 2 classes in the business grad school with Sam Hinkie, the former GM of the 76ers, and going through a 10-week course of every CEO, former GM, former owner of a team, whether it was the Niners owner, Jed York, or whether it was the San Francisco Giants owner, or whether it was you could go up and down the deck. Like, that ended up being my experience. Like, I remember George Foster talking about business sports management when I was sitting down at a faculty recruit dinner or lunch. And I remember going up to him and just saying hello, hence the reason why 2 years later, maybe I started playing halfway decent, and I sent him an email and he gets me in his class. You said first impression, which my first impression of Stanford, there was preconceived notion, and then there was first impression after freshman year. And so my preconceived notions was like, this is what it's been built up to be. I first got there, and I was, freshman year at Stanford, a lot of people struggle. Like it's like they're ultimately extremely high achievers, and they're ultimately like call them what you will, but like a lot of attention typically has came to them in their past, especially quarterback in high school, right? You know the story, Brent. So like a lot of people go there and early on realize that it's not what they thought it was, you know. And me, I set out on my journey after freshman year. I didn't play. I wasn't the guy. And I was like just so humbled by nature. My freshman dorm mates are asking me why I leave every Thursday or Friday. They're asking, I'm in a Stanford sweatsuit, and they're asking me if I'm already working at Google or a former startup, you know? And I'm like, no, I play football, blah, 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 this, right? So you get, that's like, you say first impression of actually being there. It's like, wait, holy shit. Like, this is a place where nobody really cares about, you know, who you were before you got here. And so then I set out on my journey. Like, I flipped the script. It was always about me growing up in high school and people asking me this and that, and the questions get repetitive, right? And it's like, but when I got there, I set out on a journey to understand everybody's story that I met. I tried to understand the most people's stories, you know, where they came from, what they were studying. You know, I got there freshman year, didn't really see that, but was more bummed because I wasn't looking for it. I was looking to be the guy. Like a lot of guys forget, when you're in high school, top recruit in the country, you're going to school, you still believe that that's kind of what it's going to feel like. Like why would playing high school football feel more, why would you feel more juice playing high school football than being a freshman quarterback at Stanford next in line? But that was the case. Like
it's a good point though, because it really is hard to feel, you never get the classic like I'm the big man on campus feeling at Stanford when everyone is like working on their thing. Where I mean, I remember my first quarter freshman year, I took that Soc 8, remember that class, the sports psychology class?
Yes.
And Christian McCaffrey was in the class. And I remember, you know, I'd just gone through training camp with him, and I knew him. And I knew him better than anyone else in the class at that point. And I remember thinking, like, wow, Christian's going to walk in here, and the whole class is going to be like, that's the guy who just got gypped on the Heisman last year. Like, this is our guy. And meanwhile, he's just like, excuse me, guys, like trying to find a seat. Everyone's like, oh, yeah, sorry, like whoever you are, take a seat. Like, you can sit with me. And I was just like, how do these people not understand what's going on here? And it's such a bizarre experience.
You have the stories of freshmen, you know, doing a scavenger hunt or something for a sorority or whatever it may be, and they come across Katie Ledecky and ask, like, hey, we have to take a picture with an athlete at Stanford. Are you an athlete at Stanford? She's like, oh, does a 5-time gold medalist count? Like, as a kid. But there's obviously that, you know, I mean, there is a nice little community in there that does understand and respect athletes. It's just not to the magnitude of these other places. So, I mean, I guess to answer your question, I've thought about it for a little bit. I mean, my first impression of Stanford, I'm still kind of torn with that because I'm going back to the first time I visited, visited the campus, and it was just like, it kind of just took me, it took me for a ride of just like endless opportunity. I'd kind of say is like, I think a lot of people go there shooting for the stars, both athletes and non-athletes. And maybe a lot of the athletes after their career, they have other intentions of chasing something or pursuing something afterwards. Being there, I mean, you know, I tell this story jokingly to a lot of people, but like, there's not too many places in the country that could potentially have a top 10 football team, Power 5, top 10 football team, and there could be a walk-on on the team that has more respect than a scholarship guy.
Yeah.
And I go to guys like Louis Bierk, you know what I'm saying? Guys like you, Jay, like there's guys that I know that were scholarship guys, right? Who maybe weren't playing as much or whatever, but like I knew the guys I respected more just how they handled their business, both training in football, but also how they were handling and what they were chasing for afterwards. Like you knew Louis Bierk was gonna grind something out. I mean, old school Chicago dude. And obviously I do respect Shaw in so many ways because he knows that they push that it's about a lot more than that. Obviously, as a guy who, when push comes to shove, would I rather have that or would I rather win a Rose Bowl? You know what I'm saying? I'll have that after winning a Rose Bowl kind of
Yeah,
thing. So
right.
I'm still on the side of ball, but I mean, I don't know.
You're the town hero, and then you go to Stanford, and like you're walking to class, and no one even fucking knows who you are. Was there an aspect of like, okay, like, what's up? Like,
dude, I mean,
because you go to Florida State,
listen,
you go to
listen,
Bama,
Tyler,
you end up at Mississippi State. You know how it goes, but like, was there an aspect of that where you were like, okay, why does no one care? Whereas even in high school, as opposed to Santa Margarita, where you're like the guy on a pedestal, was that like a transitional kind of shock for you, where you were like, okay,
Oh,
wow,
fuck yeah, dude. I mean, freshman year at Stanford, like not playing and not like you kind of got you kind of like naturally got humiliated in a way, right? Like you kind of got undressed, right? Like
I
you thought you were this guy, you got built up to be this guy, and you get there and you're not. I don't want to say, and honestly, when I started playing,
is that Stanford? Is that Stanford specific, or is that
no,
every college ever?
no. That's Stanford. It's exacerbated at Stanford for sure.
Okay.
I will say though, and I don't want to like we build some things up greater than they are, and in other ways, shapes and forms. When I started playing and things were humming, like I got my alter ego back. If you're asking that, like it was there. Like I knew like those that needed to know and what was going on, whether it was certain professors or whether it was extensions here because we're playing a Pac-12 championship or this and that. Like you know what I'm saying? Like there was I felt like maybe it was a lot less people than it would be at the SEC, but or at another big school, but it was just as good as that because it wasn't a bunch of people that you didn't know, like people that were in pretty cool situations and had been deemed as at the top of their field or whatever it may be. Like there was a lot of mutual respect shown. So I mean, I'd argue for me, everyone has a different experience, but freshman year, a lot of people go through that. I graduated from that and ended up like adoring my time at Stanford. Like on a football team,
There's fun to be had on campus. You mix it up. It takes
a
time.
lot of great guys, and to be honest, like I think that maybe because it's a little bit smaller and it's not to that scale of SEC, there's so much noise out there. I mean, I got 25, 35, 40 guys, including Brent, and across the board from 4 years of classes where I'm like, you call me, ask to get on a podcast or have a beer or play golf or travel anywhere. Like, if I can, I'm there.
Yeah, that's such a great part of it. That's such a great part of it.
Yeah, sure. That's huge. That's huge.
Ultimately, this is what it is. That's all that really freaking matters. Because that euphoric high you might get that I touched upon, beating fucking LSU, former national champs. I mean, let me tell you, for beating my best game at Stanford versus my best game at Mississippi State. I mean, after one game at LSU, I'm not kidding. Like you can ask ex-girlfriend, but I literally had like 1,000 text messages. Like it was like the craziest thing ever that I ever seen in my life. I didn't even know that reach existed, up and down the board. Like it took me like a week to respond to those that I thought was worth responding to.
You had Patrick Mahomes tweeting at you, dude.
Dude, I mean, Jim Nance.
Yeah, I mean, you were there.
Dudes, Romo.
Okay, wait. Hold up there. Hold up there.
Yeah,
Hold up there. We want to get there. We gotta. I don't want to fly through. I don't want to fly through the Stanford part because this was. Yeah. It's important.
It's a big part of me. It was what I thought was going to be a whole and a nice finish to a story. It just ended up getting cut short by injury. But
yeah, well,
I got a question. Yeah, go for it, Brent.
Just before we get to what prompted the transfer and the injuries that you ultimately, unfortunately, sustained. I'm remembering back to what's within my direct frame of reference when I was still on the team was the end of our freshman year. We played in the Sun Bowl against Trubisky. in El Paso, and Keller started the game. Christian sat out. Remember, there was all the buzz about that. And Keller tore his ACL in the first half, early in the game, maybe even in the first quarter. I don't remember, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
And then Burns comes in. And I remember, maybe you remember this too. Burns was taking some shots that game.
Yep.
Right against the sideline, like banging his head on the ground. I just remember thinking, what is Coach going to do if Burns gets hurt? And correct me if I'm wrong on what the rules would have been here, because I was on the sideline and I had a lot of the older guys that I was closer with on the team, Conrad and
Brett,
Calvin Chandler.
You were shitting your pants at this point. Let's be real.
Me?
No, I was when these older guys came up to me and
you thought they were gonna put you in instead of me.
Oh yeah,
it hadn't really.
Flustered.
Oh, it was 100% a rational move.
It hadn't really crossed my mind, but these older guys go, you realize, why would they burn KJ's red shirt for a second half of a Sun Bowl? Like, they might put you in if Burns gets hurt. And I'm like, meanwhile, I get 2 live reps a week with the 1s or 2s. Like, this is not going to go well. And so I guess the question that comes from that is, what was going through your head in that moment? Were you thinking, are they seriously going to burn my red shirt, or is this a chance for me to come onto the scene? And, what were you thinking about? I remember seeing you talking to Shaw and Shaw kind of mentioning, maybe they'd run like Griffin or some of the most basic plays in the playbook just to get you warm, even though I know you had gotten more reps. But I mean, what was the mindset at that point? Burns is getting rocked right in front of the sideline, play after play.
Well, when that started happening and I started feeling the energy arise of like, hey, this could be a potential, I remember going straight to the trainer and be like, hey, you got to spat me up. I've never played in a game not spatted. I got spatted up in like
Love it.
halftime or like the third quarter. I'm like, hey, if this guy's going to call my number, like I'm going to go out there
ready.
And try and save the game and win the game and write this. I mean, because first impression's big and you got a whole off season. You go out there and do something sweet. You'll be right on the scene for the following year, and then you only need 2 years and out, because that's kind of the path, right? 2 good seasons in college football. If your goal is to play in the NFL, that's what you need. And so it was that same year. If you flash back to like Colorado, when
we lost like 10-5 or something.
And we couldn't get anything going on offense. And I remember Shaw calling me in the office that week, like, hey, like, what's your thought on like if we thought of playing you the last 5 or 6 games, you know what I'm saying, or getting you some time. I'm like, I'll burn my shirt, I'll start getting my time. I don't think I need 4 years on top of this year. Like I wasn't like opposed to doing that. I mean, you remember I came in. I mean, people laughed at me when I said that. I remember A.T. Hall laughing at me when I said when I was coming in that my goal was to play as a freshman. I remember him thinking I was insane.
Yeah.
But mentally, dude, I mean, there is something about like you have to think that way.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, like I was fortunate for a really long time to be the known guy and you're the starter. But I mean, the quarterback position, as you progress and level up, and you're the 2 and everyone's pretty solid, I mean, your mentality, like how you prepare, how you're rolling out to the game, like you're going to absolutely crap down your leg if you're not really thinking about like, hey, literally, if this guy goes down, what would I do?
The next
play. I was literally thinking that way. I mean, I knew every play call. I knew what I do. Like, I listened to every play call as a true freshman, right, through the headset or whether it was through Picasso, and figured what I would do. I hadn't done it yet, but maybe it was maybe it was a little bit of false confidence, but I thought I could,
Well, you found yourself taking the mental reps, and on that note, I mean, talk a little bit about, because I told Tyler at the time, freshman year, talk about that playbook as a freshman. I mean, it's unbelievable.
It's notoriously one of the most elaborate.
It is, and the way that I would describe it, KJ, what I would say to like my friends and family back home is just like the easiest thing to say is it's more complicated than about half the NFL. That's what I was saying at the time.
It's more complicated. It's more complicated than any NFL playbook for any guy who hasn't played at least or started 2 years in the NFL. Like what they expect you to do and what they expect you to be aware of when they bring like defensive. Oh, let's put it this way: Brett Favre went 2-3 years into his rookie year not knowing what a nickel defender was.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue like before. I mean, that time if you go back 6-7 years ago, they were running a Tom Brady-esque style of offense or a Peyton Manning style of offense in terms of having answers for every possible situation and putting you on paper in the most theoretical, advantageous situation.
And so something, right? Tyler, and KJ will be able to elaborate on this way better than I could, but one thing that people just simply do not realize when you're watching a Stanford game, every single play has another play attached to it, every single time. So when you go in the huddle, you're calling, we're going to run this play, kill this entirely new play, and I will kill it given this criteria that's like in the fine print on my wristband,
and
saying,
and then you get chastised if you don't run, if you don't.
The play doesn't work. The play does not work. Like if you get up there, and
this isn't that hard of a play, but it might sound like it. Green right wing tight, Z short, 96 power, kill 95 weak, alert 200 jet dragon. So we're gonna run.
All right, KJ, English.
Context. So a lot of people would say over the years, the most frustrating thing I ever heard was, "Oh my God, your offense is so basic. We know what you're doing. It's run, pass. It's this, that. It doesn't look complicated at all." Meanwhile, I'm telling them, like, guys, we have the most complicated playbook in college football. So it's funny because it didn't necessarily look like that from the bird's eye view, from top down, which is why I think Shaw and Pritchard have graduated from it and dumbed it way down, because it frustrated them how hard they worked, how hard they prepared, like how analytical they got week in and week out. And there was other people, i.e. Coach Leach and other schemes, where they're capturing the same result or better by using a system that is the first week. It only took you a week to learn hi, hello in Spanish, right? But we theoretically learned an entire language, and you couldn't play or operate the deal, regardless of how talented you were, until you were fluent in the entire language. Is he on the inside of my guard? Is he head up, or is he on the outside of my guard? And I got to know that in a matter of 4 or 5 seconds. The clock's burning. We're late to the line because the play call took forever, because that's typically what it is. And in a matter of seconds, you got to get yourself into the right check, the right play. And, oh, by the way, if they bring this 1 or 2 looks, this all-out blitz, or this is their exotic blitz, we have a black check. We have an alert black check.
Third play.
You got to tell all these other 10 guys that we're going to get to this one specific play that they left the line. They weren't even thinking about that play. And you got to figure out a way to communicate to them, right, in a matter of 4
because there was
or 5
no
seconds.
expectation. Because there was no expectation that was what the defense was going to bring.
Exactly. But we were preparing so significantly that if they did bring this one play up, this one blitz, there is no other play that would put us in an advantageous situation outside of running this specific play. We were preparing at any given time to put ourselves in the best situation. We were preparing for any. We were going back 5, 6, 7 years on a blitz scheme that Pendergast at USC brought when he was there 7 years ago. And, like, we had to know what protection we were going to get. And we had 30 protections. When, like, you roll over to the SEC, it's really interesting. Leach, there is no plan for protection. It's figure and sort it out in live time. But their flip philosophy is they're only going to run so few things that they're going to fall into this outcome naturally, hopefully. But we were trying to, like, manufacture it and, like, know exactly what we were getting into before it happened. So I don't know. That's the best way I could kind of describe it.
Yeah, no, it's brutally mechanical, and I remember just that first few months, just it literally when you come in as a freshman, there are so many
I
rules to the
remember,
playbook.
hey, it's all about the initiation, like laughing and joking around. I remember being there because you came in after me. Did you come in? Yeah, you came. No, you came
I
in
came in
second
at
year.
camp. I came, yeah, but
Camp,
a month
but
later because I
yeah,
came
yeah.
for camp, not summer training.
Yes, so I remember when you guys had to go through your initiation of trying to show what you knew of the offense,
Couldn't even
and
get
it
a
was
cadence. I couldn't even get the cadence right.
the same way Keller and Burns would laugh at me, and you feel like you feel about this big because you're like, am I really that stupid, or is this offense just so fucking hard to learn?
Yeah,
And it was the latter. It was this offense is really hard to learn. Anybody's going to struggle. It's the Jared Goff sound effects, right? It's the Brett Favre sound effects at rookie training camp when they go into the NFL.
yeah,
And John
yeah.
Gruden's saying that play that I just said, right? So if you want to do a little skit, it'd be hilarious. But like I say that play, right, and there's no wristband, and you got to go into the huddle and repeat that play
Right.
out loud with everyone.
And you're
And
like,
if
dude,
you
I don't even know
stutter,
what you just said.
yeah, if you watch the sound effects with these rookies going in with this style, I did it at the Chargers too, and New Orleans is running the same system, which is kind of cool. The bummer it hadn't really worked out, but like my transition was like they like couldn't believe that I was able to. They would say the play and they were expecting to laugh at me, but I was able to regurgitate it right back instantly. And so it's kind of it's the Bill Walsh, it's the old school, it's the analytical. We're gonna outsmart you, and these coaches that bought into that, they did it for a really long time, and they basically brought an NFL style um, offense.
But and I don't want to gloss over all the best parts of like 2017. You had a great QBR. Team went to the Alamo Bowl, 9-win season, like lit it
Lost in the
up.
Pac-12 championship.
Lost
Went
in
to
the
the bowl.
Pac-12 championship to Darnold and USC, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, what was that just in a nutshell? What was that season? Was that just this is what I came here for? Was that validating? Was that making you more hungry? Like what was the kind of
Oh, I mean,
outcome of that?
that was definitely probably one of the more like raw, exhilarating experiences I had playing football because you come in being the guy is a big deal, but like there was already a starter previously, and he had won the last 6 games of the season in Keller, and so like when he got hurt versus UCLA, and it was me coming in the game and Burns coming in the game. It's crazy because they put Burns out first because he was older, he was a fifth-year guy, I believe, and then they put me in the next drive, and then they put him in the next drive, and he wasn't successful. And it was the fourth drive, my second drive, where I was like, if I don't score a touchdown right here, like I could be behind the pine for the rest of the season or another year. You don't know. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
because if I didn't score here, they were going to go back to Burns, and they were either going to ride him out, and then maybe if Keller, came back from the concussion and none of us proved to handle business, he would have came back in and played the rest of the season. So like that was the moment in time where I'm like, hey, this is it. It was 3rd and 5, and I remember like pulling a zone read. I mean, I'm a pocket guy. Like I want to throw the ball, right? But I was willing to do anything, right, to just make it work. So that was one of the most raw experiences. Picked up the 3rd and 5. Bryce Love went for 300 that game. I ended up, doing literally balls to the wall to the pylon. Basically, thought I broke my neck, just getting absolutely destroyed at the pylon for a touchdown. But like that was one of the most exhilarating runs of my career. I mean, it was a 2-yard run, but it was like everything on the line. Play broke down, earned the respect of the team. And
It is
Coach
true
was
though.
joking. It was a
No,
combination
no,
of the two.
totally.
Like they were scheming guys up, and JJ jumped on the scene, and Cade jumped on the scene, and Trent jumped on the scene, and Bryce Love jumped on the scene, and it was history from there. Like we were really handling our business, and then unfortunately, that would have been like the crystal ball. This is why you went there. The only sad thing was that year the freaking playoff was the Rose Bowl. So I knew in the back of my head when we were rolling at like week 8, 9, and 10, we were going to go to the Pac-12 championship after we beat Washington and then turn around and beat Notre Dame. And I was like, internally, I was pretty bummed that if we won that next the Pac-12 game, we weren't going to the Rose Bowl because it was a playoff game. But we were going to go. Who knows? SC went on and played Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl. That would have been pretty sweet.
Yeah.
But that's what ended up happening that year with Darnold. But no, 2017 was a great year. It was where like you look at stats. You're going to go to my junior year, but in terms of not caring about stats and like playing the game and talking about living in the moment and like feeling like every day everything mattered, like you were where you wanted to be. It was definitely 17 for sure.
So in the most humble way, you were the shit in that year.
Well, KJ, another thing about that probably, and you're saying living in the moment and winning 9 games and you're where you want to be, and like you mentioned, guys came onto the scene. It could not have hurt to have yet another Heisman runner-up in Bryce Love, right? That must have been pretty amazing. You got him to hand the ball off to. That's incredible.
Huge. It wasn't about me. It was like what I'm saying, like football, it's so hard. It's so hard to like go win 10 games, 11 games and make it happen. There's so many things that have to go right and there's so many people chasing it. And that year, like it kind of just came together,
I mean, granted different years, but you had Davis Mills, Keller, Burns, even Jay Rich, all these guys that were,
Brent
high
Payes,
caliber
don't
players.
forget. When I saw that cannon the first time he walked in the room, I was a little concerned.
I mean, I'm
You're
right
right.
here.
That's
Tyler.
my bad. Yeah, not Brent. Brent's not Brent. Obviously, no. Brent had a little cannon on him for sure. Brent was the guy in high school that we couldn't catch the ball from because it was too hard. Like, dude, you got to ease up. Be like, all right. No, but in all seriousness, like you were with all these guys that were super high caliber players, top notch in high school. But what is that actually like? Playing with all these guys, right? You're in a room with a bunch of alpha males that are convinced that they're the guy, they have the goods. Yeah. How much of that is friendly competition, and how much of that actually gets, kind of contentious to a certain point and almost unhealthy, where you guys are like, all right,
well,
we're working against each other.
It's a pretty sweet question because, I mean, if I never get back in that kind of a room in the football atmosphere, I'd hopefully be able to replicate that, whether it be in business or whether it be even with your friends or whatever it may be. But no, I would say it was like the healthiest thing that's ever happened to me, because like you got Keller Chris in there who's do everything right guy, right? Like everything. Like he's gonna try and be the first in the runs. He's gonna try and be the best leader, the best example for the team. You know what I'm saying? And then you got Burns, who's a 5th-year guy who doesn't mess up, right? He knows what he's doing. He's prepared. It's his last opportunity to play and keep his career alive, And then you got the young guy in there, and me, who, thought that maybe I should be playing, but I sure as hell wasn't going to be playing unless the coach thought that I was at their caliber or exceeded, right? So to me, I looked at it as an incredibly healthy environment because I was on my toes 24/7. I was like, if Keller beat me to the meeting room, you know what I'm saying? Like, I had to fucking adjust my schedule and make sure that I didn't have a class that finished 10 minutes before the meeting. Like, I needed to make sure that my schedule allowed me to be there 30 minutes early, or at least close to. We'd be sitting in there a lot of times, me and him, 30 minutes before. Like, of course, it's like, guys' dreams are on the line. So, like, I'm 100% on your side of, like, yeah, the coach speak, the media speak of, like, we're here to fulfill the what the coach says is the right thing to do. You know what I'm saying? Whoever gets the job, we're not going to step on each other's toes and do anything necessary to be the guy. We did it in a very like professional manner, like in you earn merit the right way, I think, and they did it the right way at Stanford too. Like You earned your respect doing the right thing in the weight room, in the classroom, who you were hanging around, like what kind of energy you were giving off. Were you making those? Were you elevating those people around you? Were you elevating your teammates, or was it about you? Right? Like, there's a lot of really talented quarterbacks that don't understand how to elevate everyone around them. And to be honest, I know. I mean, we had Bryce, we had JJ, we had Caden, we had Trent. I knew, and this is the reason why I love playing quarterback, to be honest. I was only as good as those around me. So, like, one of my primary goals and roles was to elevate those around me, because I was only going to be as good as they were. My O-line, how highly did my O-line think of me? You know what I'm saying? Was it about me? Did they really, like, when push came to shove, were they scrapping and clawing to protect my ass and to have me go clean for 8 games that year? Yeah, I think so, because when I put my neck on the line at UCLA, which typically, a lot of cues, you don't want to get hurt, you don't want to get hit, throw it away, right? Like, be smart. You're going to be here a long time. Like, you could be the guy for a long time. And I was like, no, I have to, like, let it all go and put it all on the line. It was survival of the fittest in a professional atmosphere. I mean, there was no dirtiness about it, but, like, I remember, like, Burnsy, like, when he left after my freshman year, he's like, hey, dude, like, I respect you and everything, how you went about your business. Like, go handle it from here. And he ended up leaving ball altogether. But, like, it was a really cool quarterback room. And I think if you go, look at the Ohio State quarterback room, all the studs they had there, you go look at, there's a lot of really good quarterback rooms, even in NFL, like, really good stories about, like, the quarterback that plays the best on a given team. It has a lot to do with what the other guys in the room look like, especially in the NFL and especially in college. But ultimately in college, it's a little different because there's no franchise guy that signed a 10-year, $500 million deal.
Yeah.
You're all survival of the fittest, fighting to potentially be that guy down the line. So I think, like, that atmosphere for me was incredibly healthy. I felt the most alive in my lifetime so far being in that environment for 4 years, and it's what I miss most, because when you feel like everything matters, it's pretty empowering to be in that environment. And honestly, I love it and miss it, because now, like, you can get away with not being incredibly disciplined, what I'm saying? Not showing up and, like, thinking 2 or 3 steps ahead. Like, I remember I started going in there, a lot of guys don't think about it, but, like, I remember going into Bloom's office on, like, Monday morning at, like, 8 a.m. and chewing seeds and, hey, let's talk about the protection meeting for 30, 40 minutes right now, and I'll write my notes. So when I come back at 2:30 and you install it the first time, I already heard it once and wrote it down, so now I can really listen. And by the way, when I went out to practice doing something that simple, I wasn't stressing that first day. I already kind of knew what was going on. Just playing ahead of the game. Like, that's kind of what and they instilled a lot of that in me. I mean, honestly, I was talented. I was this and that. But, like, when I came in as a freshman, they were like, hey, we've had Andrew Luck here. You know what I'm saying? We've had Kevin Hogan. Like, these guys ran the show in an incredibly, like, respectful manner. And they were just, they talk about the quarterback lifestyle, what it took to be the guy at Stanford. And, like, they kind of wrote the vision out. And I kind of, they challenged me, multiple times, like, freshman year, basically saying, oh, maybe we don't, maybe this doesn't mean as much, to you as, like, we think it should, type stuff, in a good way. Like,
in a motivating way, I'm sure.
Exactly. And to a guy like me, who they know, when somebody tells them that, or just when somebody tells me, like, I don't think you're. I remember the trainer, freshman year.
Barlinski? Steve Barlinski? Are you bringing Barlinski into this?
In my spring
Why are you
eval.
guys shitting on the trainer? Come on.
Oh, dude.
This guy was rough, dude. Don't get us started.
In my spring eval,
right.
he,
I'll take your word for it.
In front of the entire staff, he goes, I don't think KJ's ever going to be healthy to play a single season here. he's so weak in X, Y, and Z. Meanwhile, I blew a disc in my back, flipping a
How'd
tire.
you react to that fucking slander?
Well, first of all, I had to take it because every coach was in the meeting room, and I didn't get to talk until the very end.
Yeah, but you don't earn a little respect if you're like, yo, you're full of shit.
Trust me. I mean, the thing with me, Brent, is
It's
you know
situational.
me, right?
It's situational there.
You know
So
me.
you
like,
just eat that. You just eat that.
Not entirely. I mean, I sat up there and said, hey, like, to be quite frank, I don't think you, Bart, have any idea what kind of pain I've been through this past dude, I couldn't walk for like fucking a day or two. Like,
yeah,
I really fucked my low back up doing a tire flip relay my freshman year, trying to earn the respect of my teammates, and blew L405. Like, it was not great. I feel it every day, even now, right? But I was like, no, I mean, come on. You do have any idea of, like, what I plan to do here type stuff? I didn't say it that way, but in a manner of, like, don't worry about my health. Like, when it's time to play, like, I'll be – I haven't missed a practice yet, right? And I won't be missing any time anytime soon. So it was – my point is like, you're talking about the environment, the QB environment. I think back in the day, Stanford did a pretty good job of creating a pretty competitive environment.
They do, and KJ, you know, it's crazy. Like, it's so much easier to reflect on. And you were, again, I was a part of the program for a year, and you were longer than that. But it's very interesting to reflect, look back at. It is so much intentional engineering, and like, it's so intentional when these coaches do these mind games on 18, 19, 20-year-old kids who are so impressionable, whether it was Turley in the weight room or, you know, Tavita and Pritchard in the quarterback, or Tavita and Picasso in the quarterback room.
Tav's damn good at it.
Yeah, dude, it is a skill. It's an art, and they totally do it for you know, what they hope is for your, what you hope as the players, for your betterment, but also to see, like, where does this guy have flaws? Like, where does this alpha 4-star, 5-star recruit, whether he's a quarterback or any other position, who thinks he's Iron Man and he's totally untouchable, where does this guy actually have some sort of, like, insecurity about his game, or some sort of, like, oh God, like, they're looking for you to recoil when they say something, and it makes you so much better to have people basically prodding at you all the time, looking for, okay, where am I actually going to poke a hole in this armor? Because they're there. There are gaps in this armor, and each time that a gap is kind of exploited by a coach or a trainer, or whoever, it makes you better, and it humbles you, and it makes you better, and it forces you to close the gap.
That's the old school way, though, right? I mean, that's what we're all moving away from, you know, like, in society, but also with football, right?
Yep.
I mean, we're moving away from basically, like, that form of literally intense competition, survival of the fittest. Over time, the best is going to rise to the top. Like, that's like the core root of kind of that environment that they had going for a good bit. And obviously it reflected in the amount of wins. Obviously recently it's not been the case, but for a lot of other reasons that you could say are out of their control. But yeah.
So I think, and now we want to get to what ultimately, prompted the transfer and everything. And I know that 2019, and just off the top of my head, without doing any research back to what your official injuries were, I remembered off the top of my head that you had thumb, hip, ankle, back. And that's probably about half the list. Are those accurate? Did you heard all those things at some point? Thumb, hip, ankle, back, and then you can add on whatever other ones, and that kind of, played into why, after fantastic 2017, incredible 2018, like, huge numbers, another great year. You started in 13 games. Injuries do take their toll, and it's never just one guy or one guy's injuries. But 2019, the team struggled, and we finished 4-8, and injuries had to do with that. I'm sure you weren't feeling your best. Like, what I don't know if I guess we can give you a second to talk through the injuries and kind of how you dealt with them. Because you ultimately ended
Yeah,
up playing in 2020 in your fifth year, despite this laundry list of injuries that you got just in college, not to mention ones that were lingering from high school.
yeah. I mean, the back injury was what it was. We were training intensely hard as freshmen, right? I mean, we're doing some crazy stuff, and I had maybe a little bit of lack of mobility and and other things from a gnarly ankle surgery and a foot surgery in seventh, eighth grade that kind of crept up over time after playing 4 hard years in high school. But long story short, I mean, like it's really funny because a lot of it dates back to this non-football related injury of being a kid in eighth grade who severed second, third, fourth metatarsal in his foot, flipping a golf cart and the roof landing on my foot, and like really just like a massive trauma injury, like career ending from the doctor's perspectives initially and months into, that ended up me fighting back from, right? So a lot of the stuff over the time I know came
It
from just like
compounds. It compounds. Yeah.
but it compounded all from that, which is kind of unfortunate. But no, I mean, you add in, I mean, you start playing. So the hip was on the same side as the foot injury, and I tore my labrum in my hip. Like when I'd sit down for like 15 minutes or more, like it'd take me like I don't know, it'd be like really hard to get up and walk again. I'm like, whoa, what's going on? End up getting an MRI, blah blah blah. End up having a hip surgery that like apparently once again most people like career ending, hit labrum. It's supposed to be a big deal. Got hooked up. Coach Shaw hooked me up. Talked to Kurt Warner. He had the same thing. Went to his doc in Vail, Colorado. Dr. Philippon did an unbelievable job. He like was the OG engineer of like the new way of doing the surgery, and he did it and had me literally back up and running in 4 or 5 months. With most people, it's like 8 to 12. And I played that following season, and that was my best year at Stanford, coming off the hip surgery. So overcame that. Hip feels great now. Learned so much about my body and the way it all works. But honestly, moving forward from that, it was all just nicks and bruises and subtle tears here and there until my last game of that season in 2018. We went on the road, played in the Sun Bowl, and dude landed on my shoulder. Like as I threw, got hit by like a 330-pounder, and he just suplexed me and shoulder, boom, up and in like on impact. And then I don't know. You fast forward to the 2019 off season. I'm trying to recover from that the whole time. No way am I going to do surgery. I'm coming back, top guy. I'm gonna figure it out. Cortisone this, cortisone that, toward all this, toward all that.
Yeah.
You're gonna I mean, there's nothing that was gonna keep you from getting out there, right? You're just gonna figure it out. And then got out there and week 1 got knocked out against Northwestern. Like, pretty bad concussion, like just a cheesy call. Like I went to slide before the half. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. I do remember it. I was watching it.
And then you fast forward, have to sit out the next week against SC at the Coliseum, which was crazy. I medically got cleared. I was ready to roll, but they didn't let me play. I had to sit out a week, and then went on week 4 to play Oregon. Big game, biggest game of the career. Come down on a helmet on top of my right guard, throwing an inside fade to Colby, and tear the RCL in the thumb. It's like, can't help it. Trauma, random, out of nowhere. Battled back from that because Jack West went in at the time. Davis was out with his knee. He couldn't play. Guys are looking at me. When are you coming back? I'm like, guys, I can't even brush my teeth. They got my contacts. Thumb's not having it. But they're like, no, like, we got to go. So I'm like, oh, so I get a cortisone shot in my thumb. And all of a sudden, like, it feels better. Like,
Also, those are
magic.
How unpleasant are those with the needle that's about this big every cortisone?
Yeah.
Got one in my knee and one in my shoulder.
If they're going in the hands,
going into your finger,
or
it's terrible,
or the feet, because there's
really finger,
really tight joint spaces. Right, there's not a lot of.
They got to find the gap
in between the joints in your hand and feet.
Horrific.
So it's the most pain. Like the needle is touching your bone. you know,
It's a
Yeah.
several inch long needle, Tyler.
like
It's
shoulder and
terrible.
other spots.
Yeah.
Like
It's
it goes through
rough.
the fat tissue and it doesn't end up normally getting into that. But it was incredibly painful. But I rebounded from it. Came back, played Arizona that game. Had a good game. Threw for over 300 and thought I was ready to roll. But then this wears off, and I'm battling through the thumb. Flash forward next week, we go on the road to Colorado. I like the most freak accident ever. Dude comes around the back. I could send you the video, but I have a video of it on tape. I was like, well, this is the moment when I tore my UCL in my elbow. And it was like so obvious, like when it happened. Ended up going at halftime, getting checked out, and maybe because a little bit of help pregame, right? Didn't feel much.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, your strength's good. So I go back out there, throw a touchdown on a seam ball, play the entire second half, and I like literally just did not feel right, but ended up figuring it out. And then go after MRI, full thickness tear. Like, oh yeah, you played the second half on a tear. I'm like, oh great. So what does it mean now? You're done for the year. So that put me out for the year. And then, dude, it was like, just come on. Like, I got to get ready for the draft. Like, right at the point when I'm supposed to have my, pivotal, maintain my peak in college and move on to, the next dream, the next chapter. I just kind of got shot down back to back to back. I'm like, okay, I'm going to close the book on college and I'm going to train for the draft. Like, I'm going to get healthy.
KJ, to get a little granular, what did that do to like your psyche just in general? How'd you deal with that outside of football? How'd you deal with that?
I mean, dude, like it's so interesting because like I can go back, look back on it. I mean, it was amazing, dude, because it was when I was sitting on the sideline, um, when I was sitting on the sideline when I did my thumb against Oregon week 4. I'm sitting there, I'm like, this could be my last game in a Stanford uniform. It was the first time, like you're riding this wave, you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
And all of a sudden, like I thought it was gonna never end. There's no way it could end. There was nothing that could stop it. And then all of a sudden, I'm like, I remember looking. I think it was JJ on the side. I remember looking at JJ and being like, "Yo, dude, like this might be my last game in a Stanford uniform." He's like, "Dude, you're crazy. You're fine. Re-up." I'm like, "No, it's just how like I don't even know what's going on with this." So end up coming back from that like 3-4 weeks later, and then that injury was like, no, like it's they're like you can't throw. I couldn't bend my arm, like it was done on my throwing arm. So it was like you're done. So then at that point, but I do remember
No,
that
it
being the
is.
moment in time. The moment in time was like, oh, okay, maybe this ride is maybe you got to hang up the board for a little bit and rebound and figure it out. So that's
And
kind of where the
did you think about that? You're like this, I might just hang it up right here, like the.
no. Oh, absolutely not. No,
All
I'm
right,
talking
all
about
right.
college. Like the wave of college was done
Yeah, like
at
let's
that
make the
moment in time.
transition mentally to
But it
prepping for the
wasn't.
draft.
But it wasn't.
Let's like reload. Let's get this body. Let's get it put back together. You still got. I mean, come on. Like 2 weeks ago, you just handled your business,
Well, KJ,
and
that's a perfect segue because I really want to get into your transfer to Mississippi State.
yeah. Well, it's a lot deeper than that, and I'll talk about it with you guys, and we can decide what we want to throw out there and what we don't. Because
Perfect.
like I still have a really good relationship with Shaw and Stanford in general, and I had to cover my tracks there respectfully because I love the place, right? But long story short, and we can cut in however we want. But Brent, I'm pretty sure you know the story, but like I'm I turned my UCL. We played the last 6 weeks of the season. Davis Mills steps in, throws for like 500 yards on the road at Washington State. He's been riding the pine behind me for 3 years, and he was the number one top 3 guy coming out of high school, right? So he's like, boom, flip switch, next man up, right? So he plays the last 6 games. We don't win a lot. We win 4. He doesn't. We're not winning, but like he's showing some signs that he can play. So, and meanwhile, before that season, Shaw tells the media KJ's deciding to come back and not go to the NFL. he's coming back for this season, and we hope we can have a great year before he goes to the NFL next year. So mentally, everyone was like thinking this is my last year, and then I move on. But I did have another year of eligibility. You know what I'm saying? So I
Yep.
come in there. We play Notre Dame. We miss a bowl game because we only won 4 games. And I remember sitting down and asking Coach Shaw,
This
"Hey,
is 2019. This is 2019.
2019, yeah,
Yeah.
last game of the season on Friday before the Saturday game. I sit down with Coach Shaw, and I was trying to set a meeting for after the season so we can have like a little more extensive conversation, right? Most guys thinking about going to the NFL, if not all, went and sat in his office and asked what Coach Shaw recommended, you know. And so I did that, and Coach Shaw recommended that I go to the NFL. He said that I had done my time and that I had an awesome career and that it was super unfortunate how the way it ended. And he thought that if I got healthy, I would be, he told GMs that I'd be a guy that they'd bring in a short amount of time if he stayed healthy would be at least the minimum a great backup quarterback. And over time, if he got the hang of it and everything prevailed, he'd be a guy that, was worth drafting, right? And so when he said that, sorry, I'm going back to my mail now. When he told me that he recommended I go to the NFL, I was sitting there with a torn UCL, and I was not able to throw a football. And I had to declare by January 10th or January 5th, right? And so I'm sitting there saying, you want me to declare and probably not be able to throw in the combine? I was projected top 5 quarterback, first rounder coming into this season after based on what I've done in the past. But now, talking to agents and what's going on, if I'm not healthy and can't throw at the combine, the NFL is going to take me as cheap as possible, right? And I'm probably going to drop 4th round to 7th to undrafted. Who knows? Like, I don't know. That world gets very slippery. If you're not like a top 5 guy, or like, okay, you just missed the top 5, then you're probably going to go 3rd round. But after 3rd round, most quarterbacks drop all the way to like 6, 7 or undrafted. That's
Totally.
dynamic
You
of
say
the
the
draft.
uncertainty must just skyrocket once you're not a locked first 3 rounds guy, as you're saying.
Yeah,
mean,
but if you
And
look
you're
at
sitting
it,
here and you were the guy, for multiple years.
and let's say you don't end up getting healthy, like things get complicated, and your leash is way shorter. Like if you don't get drafted above the 4th round, so why wouldn't I want to come back, get healthy, and play another year of college football, and go where I was supposed to go, so to speak, or relatively in a place where I felt better about where it was, right? So I fired back with, hey, I mean, what if I want to come back and play another year, right? Obviously, the conversation gets interesting, right? Because he recommended you go to the NFL, and for me, that means he's moved on, right? Did I lose you guys?
no, we got you. Keep going.
Oh, yeah. And so, long story short, it basically became this world of like, hey, do you want to have 2 quarterbacks? What do you want? Me, my time at Stanford has been a 10 out of 10. To be quite frank, like I would play backup quarterback here. I'd play first string. I'd challenge Davis. I'd do anything to like get us to a Pac-12 championship and win the thing, right? Like my heart is with Stanford. My experience here has been a 10 out of 10. Why would I want to sacrifice or tarnish in any way, shape, or form my experience, my overall experience and thought in the future, looking back on leaving Stanford? Like I don't want to go anywhere, you know. Now, at the same time, I got to look out for myself, and if I want to keep my dream intact, I got to play the following year. I got to show that I'm healthy and that I'm coming back from this injury, because it's obvious. People know the word will get around what happened, and I got to show that I can, make it happen for me and for continuing on the journey. And so that kind of turned into an interesting period of time where it was like, what do we want to do type thing, and it ended up being kind of personal agenda, professional settlement, and like I need to play. And between me and you, I'm like, what are you going to tell the media? Is my job up for grabs? Am I still the starter? Does Davis have to beat me out? I'm not going to be able to play in spring, right? Um, and he's going to be able to take all the reps in spring because I'm going to be rehabbing. Is this something that's like, what do you want to do here? Like, do you want me back and we'll figure it out along the way and you got me covered? Or what is it?
Yeah, and I was dialed in. I mean, to be honest, KJ, like that's kind of like the type of stuff we want to hear about. Like that's kind of the reason for the podcast. You know, here you are, like killing it for 3 years, and one injury takes you out of the game, and then all of a sudden you're, backseated to some guy that. I mean, Davis Mills obviously is great. He's phenomenal, but like, I mean, that's honestly the story that we, want to tell, and it hasn't been told.
Yeah.
Like if you, yeah, I mean, definitely keep digging into that. That's kind of the crux of what we're at.
But one thing that I want to know is that conversation with Shaw, and when he says I think you should go to the NFL, as you mentioned, that is essentially him saying like I can't guarantee you the starting job. Like that's just that's a gut punch. Like what do you?
Yeah, and did you believe him, like when he was like, okay, you're gonna, I think it's your time to go to the NFL, or were you like, okay, I'm getting sidelined?
Well, honestly, I walked out of that meeting like gut punch, right? Like
For sure.
a guy that put everything he had on the line, essentially. No, I get it. Like it's politics, it's real world shit. So like, it takes the bigger man in me to understand Shaw's situation and what he was dealing with, right? Like what I would do if he was in his shoes. But this is kind of like when push comes to shove, right? It's like man to man. Like I'm sitting there like, hey, coach, like this is my career, this is my life. Like I don't want to leave. Like things can get really messy if I leave. I mean, potentially my reputation and everything here moving forward, like can be sour, not because of me, but because of me leaving, and it's deemed as me.
Exactly.
From
Yeah.
the perception on the outside looking in, and I'm smart enough to know that like I built a lot of really good relationships at Stanford, like whether it was with alumni, whether it was with students, whether it was with professors, whether it was with my teammates, and like I had to go fucking out of my way, sending out mass like text messages here and there, like letting people know a little bit of the situation, and it was a gut punch. It was me basically walking out of that room. My parents were there. My parents were down by the field, the practice field. We were going out for a fast Friday before the last game of the season. And, it was extremely emotional, basically telling them, like, hey, Coach Shaw moved on. And they're like, in their minds, it's like, no way. Like, there's not a chance in the world that that's the case. You're emotional. You totally misread the situation. I'm like, okay, we can hang out, enjoy our last game, get called out on senior night. I ran out that night. Parents were out there, hug Shaw before the game, right? Like it was in the fact that this conversation was had. I asked coach to have the conversation after the last game, and he thought that it was a good idea to have it before. I'm not sure that it was vicious in any way, shape, or form, but to have that, I mean, maybe, who knows? In a nutshell, it was to realize that that was my last time running out on the field at Stanford, even though I wasn't in pads. Who knows? I don't know. And so, yeah, it very quickly shifted to like, okay, this is could potentially be, I got to treat it as such, my last time running out of the tunnel, right? And not necessarily on my terms, right? So that's kind of what that was. It wasn't the end all be all, that conversation, because in many ways, shapes, or form, it seemed as if Shaw was like shocked that I even wanted to come back, right? So like I give the man a lot of credit, and I'm not in any way, shape, or form trying to like paint any picture that wasn't the case, right? Paint both sides. But like at the end of the day, a guy who was a 2-year captain, going to be a 3-year captain coming back. Stanford's specialty was 5th-year guys, 5th-year captains, right? Kevin Hogan, winningest quarterback in Stanford history, won 40 games. Like his MO was having veterans around that program for a really long time.
Yeah.
And when push came to shove, man to man, that was not the message that was delivered. And that's just the raw, like, situation, and so moving on from that, it ended up there was a series of conversations that happened afterwards that was like, hey coach, I got to rehab this whole thing. I got to go see Tom House, the best in the business, who was Tom Brady's guy, Drew Brees' guy. Like, I was lucky to be exposed to him in high school. He's from Southern California. Anyone who knows quarterback and throwing knows that he's like the biggest name in the game. And when it comes to rehab, he brought back Andrew Luck. Like, I'm like, hey, I got to go figure this out. And so it ended up, a series of conversations happened where we all went home after that last game, and there was a month before I had to declare. And that's when conversations were had of like, hey, what do you want? I mean, like, is it best for me and you if I have an opportunity to go start at Georgia, at Washington, at Michigan State, at like these places that I'm looking at, like, and then obviously the first step was enter the transfer portal. It was like, should I enter the transfer portal, right? And that was like, at the end of the day, him basically saying, right, me getting to the point like, coach, do you think I should enter the transfer portal if I have an opportunity to start somewhere else in the country next year, right? And after long awkward pause, silence, it was like, yes. And so there I had it. He's like, I fully support you in the transfer portal, blah blah. So like, it's a weird.
That is weird.
Right?
That's a weird dynamic. It's like, you
That's
just
so weird.
cut rope, but also you're gonna be my buddy and advocate, and yeah.
And now I'm sitting here after having a great career and a great time, not wanting to like saw this relationship, right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to put an end to something that I saw as like a lifelong friendship, and which it still is the case. I mean, it seemed as if it was just personal interest to personal interest, right? Like, it's what was best for him, and it was, quote unquote, what was best for me at the time, as a reaction to what his plans seemed like moving forward. But yeah, so that was kind of the nature of it, right? And hit the transfer portal, and instantly it was like a whole nother world of recruiting, and it was back to like, oh, where do you want to go? Top guy, it's the portal. Why is KJ leaving? And it's like, it was kind of seemed as like I left and I was up to me, but so it was an interesting deal, right? No one ever ends up knowing the full story, hence the reason you guys are up to doing this, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But out of full respect, I came to the conclusion that man to man, like, it was personal interest, and like, mine was obviously reactionary to his because he's the head man and he's in charge. But still, I have insane amount of respect for him. Like, I mean, obviously there's reasons why he said it was the hardest decision he ever had to make, and he got emotional with it, and it was not easy by any stretch of the imagination. The guy was not, like, nobody really wants to be in that situation, right? But it was just the reality of the moment, and that's what it was. And so then focus shifted to, hey, can I resurrect my career? First, can I get healthy and throw the ball, which I worked my balls off all day, 2 days, twice a day. Got the best doc's attention, did a lot of things I needed to do, and got back to throwing the ball well, like, and just in time to go out for training camp. And I still battled through like the incredible increase of volume right then and there in training camp. Because once again, it's typically an injury someone would come back from in like 8 months, 9 months, 12 months. And I was back at it in 6. And then, people thought it was all good and gravy after LSU, but I was still battling a little bit, just with the volume and the intensity of what it was. But anyways, long story short, I wish it ended up playing out better at Mississippi State. I think that was a situation with COVID and a full new staff, a full new environment with like taking the bottle off the cap week one. We had the most insane reaction from SEC defensive coordinators to play drop 91% of snaps for the following 3 weeks. And we wrote the blueprint for the rest of the season of how to stop Bleach's offense, quote unquote, and me.
Yeah.
And then it just kind of turns into a feeding frenzy of, you know, some unfortunate things. Guys got kicked off the team. It turned into a clean house. Like, we're going to clean the culture out. We're gonna kind of reload this whole thing and extinguish this year for the betterment of the future of the program. And it didn't help that I got knocked out against Alabama, had another concussion, and that was kind of the last time I really, played a college football game. It was Bama. So, anyways, long story short, that took me through the Mississippi State season, and then I ended up moving on and once again training for the draft. Maybe if I just left straight up the first time around, could have went late round, but would have ended up coming back and being healthy. I got beat up pretty good in the SEC as well.
Were you like, okay, why did I put in all this sweat and this blood and these tears, like all this shit for 3 years for you to say, do what you got to do? Like, was it fear of it ending? Like, what were you feeling in that moment? Because I do want to dig into that a little bit. Like,
I think, initially, obviously, all those emotions of betrayal, of putting your ass on the line, of putting your body on the line, mind, body, soul, everything on the line for the program. Like, I was all in. I was an all-in type guy. Obviously, you would hope, right, in any sort of relationship that, the counterpart understand that and fire back in full support. But the bigger man inside of me, the more mature man, the coming of age moment was, hey, our relationship isn't in a perfect vacuum. Like, he has a program that he's got to take care of. Like, he's got top guy in the country who's behind me, who's showing glimpses of some good stuff, who he might get 2 years out of, right? He might get 3 if the guy stays long enough. And that's 3 more years of some solid stuff with him versus I really, truly, deep down believe that if I came back and Shaw backed me, Davis is transferring, right? He's gonna leave. So it was kind of like, when I step back at it, I think way more highly of Shaw than to think of the initial ethos, selfish emotion of betrayal and like all of that, the raw emotion that comes up that most kids at that age probably would just swim in. Obviously, it was like something that I was swim. It did not sit anywhere remotely easy with me. But as I kind of look back on it, and even in the moment, I'm just like, eventually a couple weeks, months, days pass by. It's the only thing I'm thinking about every day, every hour of how it came to what it came to. And that's why when I boil it down, for me to move on with some sanity, it was the simple fact that he made a decision that was best for that he thought was best for his future. That was, his role was as the head coach was to make that decision, and that superseded our quote unquote lifelong friendship or whatever that may be. And then me sitting on the other side, being the bigger man, not wanting to burn the bridge of the beautiful memories that I had at Stanford, was like, okay, I mean, shit, I can either not respect it and swim in my side of the story and my grief and this and that, or I can savor those memories and go about it the right way, with my departure and how I reacted to the situation.
I think so. To not get caught into the weeds of the transfer process itself, I think this is kind of an interesting spot where I can give you a couple like quick hitter questions, and we could even say, if possible, try to answer it in one word. I'll give you just a couple in a row, just about the recruiting process. So we'll start here. What was the biggest factor in the transfer process at that point? Thinking, was it scheme, talent, coaches? In one word, what was the biggest factor in the program you were going to go to?
Going from Stanford to wherever you're going to go.
It was basically a locked-in starting spot on the biggest stage possible.
Okay, so that goes right into the next question. were you promised the starting spot at Mississippi State?
I mean, yeah, like based on
As
who
much
they
as you
had,
could be.
yeah, based on who they had, and Leach was never a promise to start guy, but based on who they had, me using my they had a running type quarterback and they were switching to a full on air raid, and Leach knew who I was and what I did against him and me in the Pac-12, and it was a mutual respect, and basically, you know what I'm saying.
Did you know Leach before the transfer portal days?
No,
Never met him in high school.
I came across him at Pac-12 Media Day, and I just said something like, I talked to him about my buddies that played for him.
Including your boy K Sweet, right?
No, I mentioned to him. I said, "Hey, how's my boy Cal Sweet doing over there?" He goes, "You can always count on K Sweet for a can of dip."
That's what he said.
That's all he said.
Oh my. Okay, there we go. Brent, I got the next two.
Go ahead.
Okay, so fair to say, KJ, you chose Mississippi State because it was the biggest stage where you were promised a starting spot, and you knew the fan base was big, you'd be on the national stage, etc.
Well, before your next question, I mean, it ended up boiling down to a ton of options, but I wanted to make a pretty concise move on, like, I had to know the coach relatively, and I had to know the situation was relatively friendly.
And you liked Leach.
Well, a couple things. One, I was locked and loaded. The final three was Washington, Georgia, and Mississippi State. And I was locked and loaded to go to Georgia when Fromm declared. And the truth of the matter with that is we're on the quarter system, and I was going to graduate in 3 years and 2 quarters. So I had like 12 units left. And I was going to be 2 weeks. When we figured it out with Kirby Smart, they're on the semester system, I was going to be like 2 weeks late to spring ball. And with him wanting to win a national title, he wanted to, like, I was locked, by the way, I was locked and loaded to go to Georgia. I was fired up, like, ready to roll. It was like, hey, Fromm declares, you're in. Obviously, there was still, the deal needed to be closed and it needed to be publicized, but Fromm declares, and we had a conversation the day before when they started to figure out the nitty gritty of when I could get there and be cleared academically, right, graduated and seamless deal. It was like, oh, you have to finish. You have 4 weeks left of school. It's like, oh, you're going to be 2 weeks left of spring ball. And all of a sudden, that scared the shit out of Kirby. And he went with this kid, Jamie Newman, out of Wake Forest, who ended up opting out and didn't even play that year. It was part of the opt-out deal. He thought his status was already high enough in the NFL, and he thought he can just, bypass playing another year of college, I guess. And he ended up opting out anyhow. I would have loved to play in an ideal world 2 years at Georgia and have a crack at the Natty, because Stetson Bennett was the only guy they had on the roster ready to go after him. And lo and behold, nobody thought the walk-on was going to lead a national championship type team. So Kirby was all in on bringing me in to compete with him and likely be the guy. And so when the door closed on Georgia, then it shifted to Washington and Mississippi State, and I wasn't going to backstab the Pac-12 and go to a team in the North at Washington. It felt like a full new deal. SEC. Leach says, hey, you want to lead the country in passing? Let's go. And that's kind of what it was.
Got it. Okay, so you decide to go to Mississippi State, and I mean California to Starkville, Mississippi. I think that's
well, I real quickly learned how to shoot a 12 gauge. That's for sure.
There you go.
I mean,
so you're in the boonies. Fan base is wild.
Yeah.
Can you just shed a little light on like what that culture shock was like in terms of going from Palo Alto, where you can be, whether you're KJ Costello or fucking Christian McCaffrey, and people barely know.
Yeah.
You're walking to class. You're walking across campus.
We can just get straight to it with like a simple metaphor or example.
Hit me with the metaphor.
You're a freshman at Stanford. You've never played. The students are asking why you leave because they think you're working at Google or a startup. But before you ever play a snap. But at Mississippi State, before you ever play a snap, and the blogs and everybody is saying that you're the guy that's going to save the program and bring them to this new promised land alongside of Leach, like overnight, you're deemed as kind of like, the guy who's going to put them on the map because they care that much. And you feel that instantaneously. getting off the plane when I went out there. The guy who, small airport, 25,000 people, 20,000 people in Starkville. The guy getting off the plane's like, KJ, nice to have you in Starkville. We're fired up. Like the guy grabbing your back, like the guy who works for the airlines. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and like walking into the dorm room, walking onto campus, the whole nine.
Yeah, I mean, it basically you pretty quickly realize that like people are looking at you, like they're when you walk in and you're like, oh, you didn't really know kind of what that felt like. But when there's such a concentration of like focus on football, right, in this little ecosystem, like you quickly realize that everyone's kind of tuned into the same channel in terms of what their liking is and what they're interested in and what they're talking about.
Did that add to your pressure? Or were you at the point in your career where you're like, I've got nothing to lose?
Yeah,
I'm just gonna go out there.
Oh, it definitely it inspired me and gave me a shitload of energy to like go out there and lay it on the line. Like you just knew it meant a lot, right? It was obvious that what you were doing meant a lot. At Stanford, you had to understand the magnitude of what you're doing was greater than what it maybe seemed like at the moment. Basically, people watching all around the country, they're pushing the envelope out there, obviously in line with their priorities.
And I mean, and let's not sugarcoat it. You get to Starkville, week 1. You're playing LSU on the road. They're coming off a natty. They've got Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards, Jamar Chase, arguably one of the best college football teams of all time. You're playing on the road in Death Valley, which clearly you've never done at Stanford previously. You're playing in front of the Mississippi State fan base, which you've never done before.
Yeah.
And you absolutely ball out. You break the all-time record for passing yards. You have 5 touchdowns. You win by 10 on the road. The fan base loves you. Patrick Mahomes is fucking tweeting about you. You're in front. You're affront all the Heisman conversations. Can you just walk us through like that game and what that meant? I mean, that's pretty spectacular. After everything you've been through with what you've kind of walked us through at Stanford, and
no, I would
you
say
get to this crazy fan base, and that's your start.
The good man upstairs gave me a good last kind of finish to a game, more relative than maybe I thought my college career would be over, but gave me a last hurrah in college football, like a moment like that, your last best game. But I remember telling my dad, "Oh, we're going to play LSU." He's, "Oh, yeah, you got to be smart, blah blah blah, this and that." I'm like, dude, if there was any time to play LSU after sending 20 guys to the NFL after winning a natty, talk about overconfidence of guys coming in week 1 having no respect for me or Mississippi State. This is fantastic. So like that was my mindset going in, was like there was a bunch of guys that had zero respect for me or anybody that across the line, and I knew I could play. So I was like, oh, let's see what it is, and that's kind of what it ended up being. Like I said, a moment in time. I thought it could be. You never know, right? I mean, UCL. I mean, that could be the end of any pitcher's career, any thrower's career. Like naturally, you hear about all the stories of guys never coming back from a UCL, never even close to the same. So to come back and play my best game I ever played, that was like at least satisfying. That will keep me sane for the rest of my life. Just after how Stanford ended, right? It was kind of how I saw potentially some sort of my senior year playing out, and it played out all in one day. I wouldn't say it ended up playing out as long or as consistent as I would have liked, but I can't be greedy, right? So, I mean, in a nutshell, that was that allowed me to be comfortable back in my own skin, basically knowing that I came back from what ended a lot of people's career and had the best game I ever had. And the rest was a bummer because I was trying to just build on that for 9 weeks afterwards and go on a run. And, I had a lot of teammates and guys behind me that knew the story and what happened. It was like, hey, keep this thing rolling, and this is the rebound. This is the and it didn't end up playing out that way. Not most things don't end up playing out
For
the
sure.
way you expect, but for what it was,
though that I think a lot of people need to know and people are curious about. And so a lot of why I wanted to bring you on as the first guest on here is because of that conversation we had in November 2020. And I remember you were like at your apartment trying to recover from that additional concussion you got against Bama after things had really gone south for really the whole team. It's unfair
yeah,
that, and part
yeah,
of the position with being a QB, you get too much praise when things go well and then too much blame when things don't.
right.
And so, I guess before I go on to asking more about Coach Leach and just what had to be a really difficult stretch, I want to know from the fan base perspective, Instagram comments. I mean, you light it up against LSU, and it's like every fan is ready to just say, you know what, KJ might be the best quarterback in the history of the SEC. I mean, they're so prone to just like
Yeah,
going
jumping on
all
it.
the way and jumping the gun.
Yeah,
And then,
Oh,
but what's so
they were ready
brutal,
to go.
they're ready to go. But what's so brutal about college football fans in general and the SEC to the extreme is it really seems like they'll turn on you in about a week and a half.
Yeah.
And I just want to know what went down there and what do you do? Because you people can say, I don't read the comments, I don't read the articles, but like when things
yeah,
start
yeah,
to go
yeah,
bad, you hear it.
yeah. Well, I mean, it it started with the thousand text messages after the LSU game, followed up by like week 2, 3, and 4 of getting hundreds of Venmo requests for money that I owed people for losing them for betting on me.
They
That
were
is
like,
just such
reimburse me.
bullshit.
Reimburse me, and then
Are
growing
you
up.
being serious? Are you being serious?
Oh,
You
I'm
got
being dead
Venmo.
serious.
How
Especially,
many? How many are we talking?
oh, I mean, it got to a point where I was just like, dude, at the time I was giving the
Like
phone
10,
my
like 10, 15 plus.
yeah, but it was every
Wow.
week. It was like five or 10 every week, and it was like a 2-3 week stretch. You get messages, hang it up, you're done, career's over. From the same guys that were hitting your DMs before, like, which I don't, dude. Like
Like what are we doing tonight? You suck.
well, yeah, but most of those any DMs that came in through Instagram that were in the section of people that you weren't following or weren't friends with. Like I'd peek. I opt for the first time ever when there's hundreds of them. Like you're gonna peek them and scroll them for a second.
Yeah.
Especially when you knew they were gonna be good, and it was just like, oh
No,
yeah,
But I think another thing that we talked about on that call was you gave me the kind of full arc lowdown on Mike Leach. And
we might have
gotta
to
talk
fire
about
up another podcast for that.
but I remember you saying that he really got angry at you in training camp because you read a coverage.
Yep.
You essentially diagnosed a coverage and saw, something, a safety roll, and you seemed to see him off a single high safety and explained that to him, and he thought it was the biggest smart ass answer he's ever heard in his life, and that it was some sort of disrespect from you. When
Yeah.
that would have been the most basic baseline answer required at Stanford to explain an interception or a batted pass.
Yep. Yep. And it's cool having this conversation with you because you can give some context and you understand. Obviously, most the lay person listening and the fan listening might not understand the detail of what we're talking about, but it is exactly that. It's basically his style of playing football is literally just trying to create like intuitive responses out there, and he thinks any sort of which the quarterback position typically is deemed as somewhat the smartest guy on the field, or at least the guy that's prepared the most or knows how the chess pieces are moving before and after the play. Obviously, Stanford prepared me incredibly well, and that's why I went there because I thought that's what they do in the NFL. And they do that in the NFL. But with Leach, what's so unbelievable, once again, two sides of every story. You can make fun of it, you can laugh at it, but 5 weeks later, I threw for 630 yards. So I'm like, holy shit, this guy might be onto something.
He's a mad scientist. Yeah.
Yeah,
Who doesn't like
made.
science? Yeah.
These guys got it made.
The combination of the two is obviously ideal, but when you've been brought up in like this very meticulous manner of like preparing for a game and how you communicate and talk about the game, and then all of a sudden you got to throw everything you've learned out the window and kind of just basically he's like, hey, I want you to talk to me, I want you to talk to your teammates like you're talking to second and third graders, right? Like we got to bring this thing all the way back down, like we're trying to we're not trying to slow anyone down by paralysis by analysis, so to speak. And so that it was very interesting. I mean, obviously, I thought I could go out there. I knew I heard through the grapevine that was kind of his style, but I thought I could bring my toolbox and then basically throw out a lot of what I didn't deem as necessary, and then because of his style.
But you're in a unique, situation where you're playing under one of these coaches that is seen as a maniac. For most of the fans of college football, I would say over the last 3 years, like Mike Leach is seen as a maniac. A week and a half ago, he was kicking over chairs on the sideline so his players didn't have anywhere to sit.
Yeah.
Like that, that's a real thing that happened. And like, were you like, yes, this guy's got it made, or were you like, this guy is psychotic, but his offense is a perfect fit for me? Like, any info you can give our millions.
KJ, did he?
I mean, who is Mike Leach?
Well, Mike Leach has a perception unlike any other. If you line up 100 people, him and maybe one other person would have his take on that particular subject. So I guess that puts him in a boat of unique. And I remember before the LSU game, he tweeted something along the lines of, at like midnight, I'll debate anyone on any topic anywhere in the world right now. On Twitter or something. He said something like that. I remember reading it. He also proceeded to show us the Mike Tyson fight
because his insight was so.
Wait. Keep going. What did he do with the Mike Tyson fight?
But he showed it like 3 or 4 times and like trying to bite the dude's ear off before we played LSU.
It's embarrassing. That doesn't surprise me at all.
You also told me.
We would be
go ahead.
We would be in QB meetings and for at least an hour or so, he would talk about anything and everything but football. It would be about world events. It would be about politics. It would be about geopolitical tensions. It would be like, and I honestly, so me and Leach outside of football, I mean, I could drink a beer.
Liked Leach.
Listen, I definitely, I respect Coach Leach, right? I respect what he's done, right? I mean, everyone does it in their own rhyme or fashion. I wouldn't say that I'd go about it and do it the same way he did. I respect a lot of his outcomes that he was able to facilitate in college football. At first, it blew my mind that the outcomes were even a possibility based on his style. But over time, I grew and understood like what he was trying to do. Like he was trying to create a super monotonous system that like basically allowed a bunch of a bunch of really hardworking, talented young guys to like not think and just play and be gritty, dude. I mean, like he created an atmosphere that was just like middle of practice, ball hits the ground, the entire team is doing up downs like until he says no. And then when he sees like you're kind of tired, the first play he's going to call is 4 verticals. And like I could barely throw the ball 5 yards because I just did 20 up downs. You know what I'm saying? And it's pissing rain out or like it's crazy bad weather and there's still no reason the ball should hit the ground. And if if another guy drops the ball during practice, after practice, everyone's going to line up with somebody else 5 yards apart and they're each going to catch 150 balls and they're going to count them out loud. Right, like he's the oldest of old school that's left in the environment that we all call college football and football, And my high school football coach was a lot like that. I mean, he said things that if any of it was on tape, like in this world that we live in of politically correct, I mean, come on, like, and so I respect that. Like, it's raw, it's organic, it's yeah. No, you're
Yeah, I
100
mean,
you're 100% right,
Tom
Brent.
Izzo,
Like
he abuses all of his players.
I mean, if you think about it, man, it's like you go back. Like I think in Leach's wildest dreams, he would want to be like the commander in chief during the American Revolution. Like he would want to be the guy.
That's not promising.
Well, what I'm saying is like I mean, he has yeah, I mean, he basically delivers a certain level of intensity and energy just based on how he communicates, right? Like when he brings the team up and when he talks about certain things, like it's not necessarily a rational or analytical solution. The solution is basically you're just not
Get
hard.
yards. Get yards.
You just don't care. Like you don't care enough. Like you're like.
So KJ, hypothetically, you go out there, you miss a read on a post. In practice, blatant, right in front of him, you miss like a blatant read. What is Mike Leach doing as opposed to Shaw?
I think Shaw is mad that you missed the read. Leach is way more mad if you missed the throw itself, right?
Oh,
Just what
He doesn't want you to be making a read.
100%.
What does Leach do when you fuck up versus what does Shaw do when you fuck up?
Oh, well, I mean, between us, I mean, I never really once got yelled at in my career with Coach Shaw. You know,
Right,
but that doesn't mean that his strength coach and that Bloomgren, my offensive coordinator, and his quarterback coach didn't, because they did. So Shaw puts himself in a position where he's not the one delivering that coercive.
Is that because he just positioned himself as the CEO and he's resolute and he's a calm, placid man, or like you're in a unique position, KJ, where you've seen him, you've seen Shaw, and you've played under him,
Brent would agree.
where he's
I mean,
calm,
come on, like
he's reasonable.
Well, it's
And then you went and played under Leach, who is like the opposite, or perceived as the opposite of reasonable. So
rightly so though. Like there's
I
a
feel like
reason.
I feel like you have an interesting perspective on the differential.
No, I mean, yeah, I think Brent's 100% right. I mean, I think Coach Shaw is upset with the fact that you made a mental error. Like you went to the wrong spot. That guy was covered, and it was this coverage, and you shouldn't have been hanging on it that long.
Whereas
when Leach where Leach a coverage that I never should have touched a post route in 100,000 years at Stanford, even if it worked, I've been like, that would never work again on paper. That was lucky.
Yep.
Leach is like, hey, if you think it's there, like rip it. Like there's no coverage. There's no preconceived notions of what we can and can't do before the snap based on how we think this is going to play out, right? Me versus the other team. Who's going to make the right decision more often? You got one.
It sounds like Leach doesn't give a fuck.
Of course not. He care a lot. Like he's like, I mean, if it's cover two, I mean, the corner could slip. He cannot get the signal from the safety. They could be in the wrong coverage. He can slip on a banana peel. That's shit he'd say. He's like, well, who knows? Why do you think? Why do you think that it's going to play out this way? Why do you have so much respect for the defense? Like he and he's a smart guy. I think he knows coverage X, Y, and Z, this and that. But dude, Brent, you were in the room with me when we were going through a scouting report of UCLA. I knew where the guy went to high school. I knew how tall he was. I knew how much he weighed. I was writing notes from like what I remember that dude did in high school. You know what his forte was when we did the 30-hour long meeting. Leach gets up there like, we're playing Bama. He's like, 22. These are all faceless, nameless. Who gives a shit, right? Like, I don't care what coverage they play. I don't care what they do. We're gonna go out and do what we do and put the ball in play and see what happens, right? Like, he's that other side of the spectrum where it's like, I told people this all the time. I mean, he's not subject to social norm, right? He supersedes social norm. He supersedes what like everybody else thinks. He puts himself in that world where like, oh, everyone says X, Y, and you can't say X, Y, and Z. Oh, everyone says you can't do this versus that coverage, or you can't do that. Like, I've seen it happen before. You know what I'm saying? It still could exist. Like, it's not like he doesn't put himself in an echo chamber of what everyone else, the styles of football that everyone plays, the coaching conventions, like everyone wants to do this. He's just like, I'm going to give my guys the bare minimum tools and kind of be hands off as hell and make them tough MFers to where they are never willing to say die, because that's like the military side of him type. And when push comes to shove, like we're just gonna beat you with pure will and balls at the end of the day. I mean, his guys play hard, dude, like really hard, you know. And that's his style, man. He's won a lot of games, I mean, I think he's also been in a lot of situations where, maybe the Alabamas, the Stanfords, the USCs, the Ohio States, the Michigans, right? They wouldn't hire him, right, because of the unorthodox, right? The lack of tradition, the lack of tradition, basically, is what it is. The lack of like playing by the orthodox rules of football and what it is, how you talk to players, how you run meetings, how you do everything. Like, he did it so different. And I will say that I don't think, with the way this world's moving, I think Leach will be one of the last to ever do it with that style. I hope not. I really don't. I think there's a place for both styles. I think it should be around. I think it's fucking really good for society to have both sides, to be honest. Because, right, you got one side of the spectrum that, right, is, incredibly politically correct, for lack of a better word, and then the other side that's just like so raw, like it's like shocking what he said every time he said something. It's like unbelievably shocking. Like, I don't care where you're from, like I don't care if you're from the South, I don't care if you're from California or from Southern California, I don't care where you're from, but like I respect those styles, man. I mean, I extrapolated some quick success with Leach's. Wish it would have been better. Maybe I would think a little bit differently. But I do know that he exceeds being the leader in an environment where the fans and everybody really, really values football, so they're willing to put up with whatever it takes them, or whatever it takes to get them to win football games. And he's, been at Washington State, he's been at Kentucky, he's been at Texas Tech, and now Mississippi State. All very similar niches in terms of schools that he has coached at in the past. And his style has obviously worked in those, at those schools, and Shaw's different, right? He went to Stanford. He coached under this tree of Bill Walsh from decades back, and basically just carried on a tradition and an orthodox method of a new style of football, the West Coast pro style system. So it's pretty cool, man, to see like both sides be able to capture some success at the highest level. I mean, they both did it to a certain extent.
Yeah, that's well said. The stories, I think, will never end. As long as Coach Leach is remotely in the spotlight, the stories will keep coming, and the quotes will keep coming, and the social media posts, and the, post-game speeches. This is my last question. And if the meeting goes away, it's fine. We still have the audio. So, since the kind of ultimately tumultuous season at Mississippi State, you have had tryouts with both the Chargers and then later, a year apart, roughly, even longer?
Yeah.
Tryout with the Saints, neither of which have converted, but you're still training, as you were telling us at the beginning. Still kind of in that stay ready mode, it seems. And also potentially looking at USFL options, but
Yeah.
the real final question here, which I think kind of is a good thing to wrap up on, given everything that we've covered, is is it fair to say that you feel prepared and confident to enter, what you would call the real world or, a regular job when that day does come? Because I would assume that the bulletproofing effect of kind of the trials and tribulations you've faced have to inspire confidence and make you feel like you've got the fortitude to take on, just about anything the world might throw at you at this point.
Absolutely, dude. I mean, I think that's why football is the greatest sport on earth. I think it's um, basically the only other closest metric to measure upon preparing and creating this like fortitude, like you mentioned, to overcome anything that comes your way would be war. you know. But in many ways, shapes, and forms, I mean, I don't know. I would believe there's a ton of parallels between anyone that's served for any time, you know, for the country. But I mean, yeah, dude. I mean, I don't think. I mean, the combination of physical pain, the combination of physical adversity and emotional adversity. I don't think, um, maybe in the world of business, right? There's certain stresses in the real world. There's financial stresses. There may be some situations where you might not seem that there's any that you can't keep your head above water. Maybe. I mean, I know obviously that's a real thing, but um, when you add in what um, the majority of us who play 5, 10, 15 years of football, you're going to, like, it is inevitable that you are going to come across landmines that try and destroy you along the way. And obviously this is the this is the overarching um, theme of the journey, is that um, when you come out the other side, it doesn't seem like there's any tunnel dark enough for you not to make it out. I guess that's kind of where I'm at now, right? I mean, I don't my future in football is uncertain. I mean, I went to training camp, was on the team with the Chargers, went to training camp, was on the team at New Orleans, but never got my never took a snap in the NFL so far. And I thought I'd be playing until I was 35, if you asked me 2.5, 3 years ago. So, I mean, in a nutshell, yeah, I mean, moving forward, I don't feel like there's any obstacle that I won't be able to overcome. I do feel like um, in the real world, it's a different arena. So how you end up evolving and overcoming these uh, different forms of adversity would be a bit of a challenge to kind of figure out how that will play out. But I at least think the skills and the underarching real conviction and fortitude that I feel like I've accumulated from overcoming what I've been through should be able to get me through anything else I come across in the future. But nothing's easy, and I still plan to prepare um, the same way I did when playing a game, or when preparing for a 6 a.m. workout that you maybe didn't think that you're going to be able to get through. It's all the same stuff. I do feel like it's definitely a incredible tool in the long run, and yeah, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the journey. Let's put it that way.
Good, dude. Well, I think that's the right outlook. Thanks so much. You're the man. That was long. We're going to edit this thing, and we'll send you what we have before we do anything with it.